This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of What If Emotionless Hinata travel back in time for Naruto. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
She was at high Anbu level, nearly reaching S rank in Ninjutsu, and had completed manipulating the fire, wind, lightning, and water elements. At this point, her chakra capacity was almost at the Sannin level. She had a near Genjutsu mistress and her chakra control had advanced to the mid-Sannin level. Now she just needed to gain more experience and improve her ability to control her methods. She was still learning how to use two elements at once with single-hand seals with both hands at the same time, but she was now able to use all of her elements with just one hand seal up until mid-A rank techniques. As usual, Anko Mitarashi wore her hair in a short, spiky, fanned ponytail. She had light brown, pupilless eyes and black hair with a blue tint that gave it a violet hue. She was flaunting her luscious, sinful figure in a dark metal mesh bodysuit that hung from her neck to her mid-thighs. Wearing a black miniskirt that was just a tad bit above indecent and pushing the boundaries of it, the mesh suit was encased in a gray overcoat with purple seam. Dark gray shin and wrist guards completed her ensemble. Like Kurenai, she was also wearing high, laced sandals, but they were black. Her body had developed over the previous 2 years, and it was given the opportunity to reach its full potential following the removal of the cursed seal. Her waist had shrunk, giving her an hourglass figure akin to Kurenai's, and her tits had grown to almost an enormous cup. She had a slightly larger and plumper ass than Kurenai. However, Anko exuded sultriness and seduction like a succubus on a hunt, while Kurenai was more like an exotic fruit that attracted everyone like bees to honey. Her chakra levels had risen to mid-cage level after her curse seal was removed, but she was now at high cage level. High Sannin was under her chakra control. Her Goken and true snake styles of Taijutsu were at mid-Sannin level. Anko was able to unleash any technique up to mid-S rank with just one hand seal after mastering her two primary affinities, fire and earth. Her low Sannin level of affinity for wind was minor. Nonetheless, she was able to initiate collaboration jutsus by simultaneously using both hands to execute single-handed seals. She had also received instruction from Lady Mito in the simultaneous use of a katana and a tanto. She had committed to learning and mastering her two weapons and was only at the high Anbu level of Kenjutsu. One of the most stunning women they had ever seen was Hinata Hyuga. After returning from 6 months of training with Lady Mito, her body had changed and had grown more mature. Her hips had curved, and her breasts had gotten bigger. Her legs were sleeker and longer, and her waist became thinner and more curved. To put it briefly, she nearly had the appearance of the ideal supermodel. She had grown bolder and more gregarious after her hentai jutsu training and seduction, and she even started flirting with Naruto. Every male onlooker stopped and gazed at the sublime creature, whose silky dark hair with a blue tint fell past her shoulders to the small of her back just above her perfect ass. The women both knew they had a slight crush on Hinata and Naruto after they had grown up during the training trip. She seemed to be saying, "You know you want it," with her sensual, almost hypnotic hip movements. At the end of their 4th year in the training plane, Hinata had really begun to pursue Naruto, but the boy was still a little naive about her feelings for him, and when she smiled at them, her eyes turned a beautiful shade of lavender that warmed anyone's heart. Anko and Kurenai were unaware that they had both matured early and developed more beautiful, yet deadly, and powerful bodies than others as a result of their secret training in pure chakra with Hashirama-sensei. Hinata's chakra control was at low Sannin level, and her chakra capacity was now at mid-Anbu level. She was proficient in the two primary affinities of lightning and water. With the exception of those with levels higher than mid-S rank, she was now able to use the majority of her water jutsu with a single hand seal after being thoroughly trained by Tobirama-sensei. She had a low Sannin level affinity for lightning, and for the majority of her techniques, she could only use 4 or 5 hand seals. After their training with Madara Uchiha, her very slight affinity for fire was along high Anbu level, and her medium affinity for earth had advanced to the high Anbu to borderline Sannin level, where she was able to reduce the hand seals to less than 10. Her ninjutsu was identical to that of Anko, Kurenai, and Naruto, just like both of her friends. She reached a level where she could use her elements with just a single hand seal, launch collaboration jutsus, and use two elements at once while using single hand seals with both hands simultaneously. When Maida Guy was not using his weights, she was genuinely on par with him in her own taijutsu style, which she had developed over the years. She referred to this style as the Raging River style, which combined stances from Jayuken, dances of the Kagaya clan, and many other styles to create a hybrid style that used the same principles as the Yuhi clan Taijutsu to injure the enemy with weapons and chakra scalpels. The main difference was that Hinata's Taijutsu was more akin to flowing water, whereas the Yuhi clan employed dance-like movements. Her medical training was at the mid-Junin level, and she could compete with both Anko and Kurenai in Taijutsu. Lady Mito had also encouraged Hinata to learn archery, stating that she would be an excellent long-range fighter and that her abilities would grant her a slight degree of invulnerability. If someone can kill you from more than half a kilometer away, how can you attack them? Hinata had been a very dangerous foe, Byakugan or not. Hinata's arsenal reached a whole new level of potential with the addition of a truly long-range speciality. Additionally, Lady Mito had promised to teach Hinata Onmyoten Yin-Yang release, which she had mastered in her later years, if she could shoot targets moving at low to mid-Sonin speed while running at those speeds. The ability to see almost 360 degrees, the ability to see through surfaces, and the capacity for observation were the three main features that most people mentioned when discussing the Byakugan. At extreme ranges, Hinata's Byakugan also appeared to enable an almost supernatural eye for detail. When Lavender-eyed Hinata was 7 years old, she was able to throw any throwing weapon 10 times out of 10 from 50 meters away, and if she used chakra to increase the strength of her throws, she could do the same at 100 meters. Hinata never missed anything thanks to the Byakugan in her own eyesight, which was enhanced by pure chakra. Lady Mito was convinced that the concept was entirely meant for Byakugan users like Hinata who diversified and broke traditions, rather than letting them rust and become complacent, after she practiced pecking a butterfly from almost a kilometer away for days and weeks. When Hinata considered using seals to enchant the bow and arrows, she used to make them soundless, unbreakable, and the like. She had some fiendish ideas. However, drawing the practice bow correctly required chakra enhancement of her arms, and she wouldn't be able to make a shot like that in a forest. Lady Mito appeared to have her own thoughts based on her sensei's appearance. Using his own Mokuton Jutsu, Hashirama was asked by Lady Mito to create a unique wooden bow set that included 3 different kinds of bows and thousands of arrows. He improved each one by using his Sage mode. The works that were produced were works of art in and of themselves. In recognition of the strength and skill that each bow possessed, Hinata had given them the name Sage bows. Every bow was a beautifully crafted bow shaped like a falcon or a predatory bird. There were multiple categories for the arrows. Lady Mito had been sealing the bows and arrows for 2 months. The 3 bows were designed to be nearly indestructible, silent, and capable of calling forth to her by means of her chakra. The arrows were designed to have a variety of effects, such as exploding, releasing ninjutsu, or releasing a poisonous fog. The outcomes were worth the 3 to 4 months it took to complete the project. Any kind of chakra could directly attack the bows, and as Hashirama showed by scratching the bows in his Sage mode, they were self-repairing if they were damaged. The most exotic arrows had reverse summoning seals, but the others were a little more intricate. Another Naruto remained motionless, patiently waiting for his clones to inform him that the seals he had just applied were functioning flawlessly as they tested them in the defenses. Meanwhile, 2 more clones were dispatched to see if the barrier team had been notified. To put it mildly, there was a big difference between this Naruto and the original. He was dressed in a mesh shirt with a recognizable long sleeve and black leather Anbu pants. Like Anko, he had guards covering his forearms, but his were crimson in color and featured 2 symbols, the Senju clan and the Uzumaki clan. Like Madara Uchiha, he was dressed in pale blue armor with a unique pattern of gray stripes from his clans on the front and back. The armor covered his chest, the sides of his thighs that joined to cover his crotch, and the upper half of his arms that extended upward to cover the sides of his face, with the shirt sleeves rolled up to the midpoint of his forearms. The armor had thick black streaks running along the arms, chest, back, and thighs in the same locations as Madara's. He was wearing black boots and black gloves. Under his leg armor, he wore a mantle as well. It was difficult to tell by looking at him alone, but he had developed a nice way of filling out his clothes over the years. He would appear extremely thin to most people, but his appearance was misleading. Every muscle on his body was lean and very taut, and a trained eye would see that there were many very strong muscles. He had muscles that flexed and rippled with every movement. He didn't have any extra weight or bulk because his body was designed for agility, speed, and acrobatics. He was notably paler than the henge, nearly white, as a result of spending the majority of the previous 2 years, real-world time, in the training plane and making extensive use of the perfect chakra. Additionally, Lord Hashirama and Madara Uchiha's DNA implants showed some physical symptoms. His typically pale blonde hair had become wilder and thicker, with crimson-hued, deep red color leaking into the roots. He even adopted Madara's jawline, and his features had become more angular. His eyes had changed the most, in his opinion. The once bright, gleaming sapphire eyes had turned into frigid glaciers. His current eyes were as cold as ice, with a sharp, calculating gaze that attested to a cunning mind, even though they still had that ocean blue color that the old Naruto's eyes were simply striking. Additionally, the henge's signature spiky blonde hair was no longer present. Instead, it had grown out and was pulled back loosely in a ponytail. On the streets of Konoha, his pale face and red and blonde hair would make him stand out. To put it mildly, he had an exotic appearance. A handsome face that was beginning to take on the first lines of adulthood, losing all the roundness that most youth possessed, was framed by his loose blonde bangs. The only noticeable resemblance between Naruto and his clone was the whisker lines on their cheeks, but even these were thinning and difficult to distinguish at a glance. But whenever he used Kyuubi's chakra above two tails, they returned in a more savage way. At the request of his instructors, he had studied and become proficient in 8 different forms of Taijutsu. These included the Goken, Snake Style, Hummingbird Style, Lady Mito's Water Fist Style, Tobirama's Lightning Fist Style, Hinata's rendition of Jiyuken, Hashirama's Personal Taijutsu Style, and, last but not least, the Personal Taijutsu Style of Uchiha Madara. He possessed both Baiju level chakra capacity and mid-cage level chakra control. Given that he employed at least 100 kage bunshin for these exercises and that his chakra capacity resulted from his ancestry as a Jinchuriki and Uzumaki, it was a true accomplishment for Naruto. When it came to his training in chakra control and Lady Mito's guidance on his negative emotion sensing, Hashirama Sensei had been correct. He was already at a mid to high Sannin level in both ninjutsu and elemental manipulation. Up until he attained mid-S rank jutsus, he was able to master his 3 primary affinities, earth, water, and lightning, by launching their jutsus with a single hand seal. To effectively use the justus, he needed at least 1/3 hand seal above the high A rank, otherwise, his attacks used the regular chakra as needed. He had been able to learn how to make his jutsu more effective in less time, consuming by using a number of tips from his dead teachers in the Uzumaki journals. His genjutsu is in the range of high A rank to S rank. He was able to identify and neutralize several A rank genjutsus as well as a few S rank ones. After training, Naruto received his own sickle and chain, which allowed him to compete against his Uchiha Sensei in a full-length match within months. In the training plane, Lady Mito herself had forged a katana and given it to him. It was an ancient blade known as the Muramasa, but Lady Mito had reforged it using chakra metal and added several invisible seals, one of which made the blade vibrate wildly, enhancing its cutting power 100-fold and enabling it to channel any kind of chakra nature through itself, further enhancing its lethality. His Kenjutsu, who was at the level of Madara Uchiha and low-level Sannin, had almost lost an arm in combat. He had made very little progress in his training to learn how to use both weapons simultaneously. It seems that the barrier team has raised the strength of the village. My clone has just dispelled. We can now begun on remodeling the land before I begun the construction of the clan compound. However, we will need the help of Hashirama Sensei as my Mokuton Jutsu is not very advanced. Hinata, will you be able to summon him again or shall I do it? Asked Naruto with his trademark icy whisper. She used the dreaded puppy eye jutsu, which caused her eyes to water and swell, and said, "No need Naruto-kun. I will be happy to help as it is going to be our own clan house after we marry. Or do you not find me beautiful enough?" She pouted and stuck out her tongue in a rare display of childishness as Naruto continued to stare at her with his deadpan expression. Her rare display of innocence, which these two deserved rather than the fact that they were making decisions like seasoned war veterans, made Kurenai and Anko smile. Even Naruto, who has always maintained his composure, smiled sparingly, turning the corners of his lips to divert attention from his intense blue eyes. Though it was the bare minimum, Hinata gazed at Naruto because it was uncommon for him to display emotions so openly and carelessly. She occasionally cursed herself and brooded in her guilt over the choice to force Naruto to mature quickly and remove his innocent perspective on the world, which was the reason she had fallen in love with him in the first place. But the alternative was to let him become a doormat for the others, who would only use him before discarding him like garbage. Later in life, when the storms that would afflict the shinobi world were just waiting to be unleashed around the corner, she had made the decision to create their own happy memories. With his typical monotone, Naruto said, "Anko-san, come with me. Kurenai-san, you may join us, or would you like to stay with Hinata and watch over her for me?" All emotion vanished, making the harsh winter feel like a dead breeze. "If you don't mind Uzumaki-kun, I will stay with Hinata. I have to ask her a few things myself." I will join you later, Kurenai said in a low, husky voice after flashing her predatory smile like a succubus on a hunt. She then blew him a kiss and resisted the urge to smile at the challenging scowl that formed the Hyuga's face. What I have told you to call me Naruto-kun. It is either Anko-chan or Anko for you. You don't have to be so formal with me. Of course I am just itching to try out a few just you. I have been bored the entire way back to the village. You know this seems awfully like you are trying to take me away so that you can have my body to ravish. Is that why you are asking me to go with you, Naruto-kun? Do you want your sweet, innocent Anko-chan to be your first? However, I have to admit that I am attracted to him, and I will not let any opportunity pass me by. But I will have to fix that icy exterior of his if I have to be with him, Anko thought to herself, recalling all of her hentai-jutsu and seduction training. With Anko complaining after him about young, attractive studs who were too heartless for their own good, Naruto left without even blinking. Hinata was willing to burn the woman with her eyes alone as she glared daggers at Anko's back. With barely disguised laughter, Kurenai watched them leave before casting a sly glance at Hinata, who gasped inwardly at the blatantly immoral expression on her former mentor's face. With a husky voice that sent a delightful chill down the young girl's spine, she purred, Hinata-san, we are going to have a talk. Anko followed Naruto outside, sulking at the icy man Naruto had started using at the end of their second year of training. She missed the old, carefree Naruto, who would always smile and express himself freely, but she never said it aloud. Naruto abruptly left them all to train with Lady Mito and Hashirama Sama for 3 months, and upon his return, he had undergone significant transformation. Though Tobirama Sensei had been a little gloomy after Naruto's return, he had appeared to be lost like a leaf in a wind and had refused to speak to anyone but his teachers. Even then, it was in yes or no 3 of their sensei had heard about what had happened with Naruto but had never mentioned it. The 3 of them had talked about what had happened because none of their teachers would say a word. Hinata had a hunch about what might have happened, but she refused to share it with them, claiming that Naruto should be the one to tell them about his transformation. After taking a few steps around the Uzumaki temple, Naruto came to a stop. Because of his training, his negative emotion sensing ability was always active, so he could sense the chaos that was currently engulfing Anko. He was aware of Anko's thoughts, but in reality, he didn't want to burden anyone with his suffering and what he nearly believed to be the ultimate betrayal. Start of the flashback, it was a little overwhelming to see the vast emptiness before him. After a few weeks of introspection, he finally agreed with Lady Mito and Hashirama Sensei when they both stated that he needed to do this. He had a suspicion that the trait that gave him his never-give-up attitude, his stubbornness, had ultimately let him down one last time. I am speaking from experience, Lady Mito said in response to his question about whether it was really necessary as they came to an end of the dark corridor they were traveling through, which led to the large empty plain in front of them. No matter how much you wish to deny it or hope to return to the simplistic naive view you once held, Hashirama knows that it is not going to happen if the desire is only one-sided. His own history with Madara is proof of that. With doubt comes anger, and that was what anyone would have planned to exploit to escape. It has almost always worked too when the seal is loosened, the seal in the future using the Kemonato left for your seal. I have myself just barely managed to restrain the Kyuubi long enough to retighten the restrictions on its chakra during my trial, but yours is different because the Yondaime still left the seal in a weakened state. I don't know what he was thinking, and as a result, a fourth voice called out to them as the door at the end of the passageway opened. Naruto and Yondaime both created me, the voice said. Despite having red pupils surrounded by darkness, Naruto gasped as he saw a figure standing in the doorway who was exactly like him down to the last detail. Although perhaps creating isn't the right word exactly, more like gave me enough chakra for me to manifest. In response to his nod, Lady Mito and Hashirama Sensei said, yes, although what you hope to achieve now is impossible to say. With a sly smile, the dark Naruto declared, my dream is the same. I'm going to become the real Naruto, and then I'm going to teach the stinking village a lesson for all the hard times and pains they've given me. After exchanging glances, Lady Mito uttered the words, Yami. Naruto, you don't. Do you really think that smiling buffoon you met is who your legacy really is? He's just a mask that became real. Shut up, the dark aspect yelled, making the redhead back off. You weren't there. You have no idea of the shitty life I had. I apologize for what we've had, but I'll fix it soon. The woman said, I so never wanted a child to bear the burden put on you. To give you, after witnessing her descendant's face contorted in such a furious veneer as it spat its ire at her. But you weren't, the dark Naruto said icily, his words layered in unforgiving ice. Lady Mito wondered if that was how her descendant had really felt about her and her legacy, as the words pierced her like a knife. She felt like crying and started to embrace herself. On the other hand, Hashirama put a reassuring hand on her shoulder and said, "Don't let its words bother you. It is merely acting as it was wished to be. But this is why Naruto has been so withdrawn lately. It is simply using his own doubts against him." That is so very cold of you, Hashirama," said the gloomy Naruto. "There was a time when you would have called me the real Naruto." "But you aren't," said Hashirama coolly. "You're merely a construct of his negative emotions given a semblance of life due to his and Kyuubi's chakra and are no doubt using the platform that had been sustained by the weak seal to maintain your existence. But in all honesty, do you think I've been able to influence him to such a degree off of the scraps of chakra that were left to me?" Dark Naruto grinned and said, "You're only partly right. True, although you ripped the access from the dais where it was lying dormant, but there was enough chakra present to sustain me." Then, the corridor vanished, to be replaced by the Falls of Truth. Hashirama looked around in disbelief and exclaimed, "How? Why, you were just talking about it." Dark Naruto said, smirking, "You know you have some rather dark memories of this temple. I have been able to access the memories of this place ever since both of you have been trying to heal his damaged psyche. Ah, betrayal, it's such a beautiful emotion. Why, it almost feels as good as when the villagers slammed that blade into my chest and tried to rip my heart out. I was just 4 years old." Both of them gasped upon hearing that, causing the dark version of Naruto to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, did the fool fail to mention that to you? Makes you wonder what else he's hiding from you, doesn't it?" Focusing back on Lady Mito, he said, "Come on Lady Mito, don't pretend you truly give a rat's ass about this child's dream. These are the same people that forgot you and your country and their sacrifice for nearly half a century, and you really want to be reunited with your brethren. Why, I imagine Konoha was snickering for years after abandoning your clansmen and country to the death." Lady Mito lost her temper and yelled, "Shut up. I will not be lectured by some puppet that made a false aspiration real." The shadowy Naruto laughed and said, "There you go again, acting as if I'm not the real Naruto. If all it takes to be considered real is to be flesh and blood, then once I break the childs will all be the one calling the shots, because as you well know, being considered real is a matter of perspective." Lady Mito and Hashirama were momentarily perplexed as to what Naruto's construct was referring to. A flashback, however, showed Madara addressing the Shodai Hokage and saying, "Hashirama, you are merely a single life, an existence of energy that once was an under an ultimate form submission." Hashirama was struck with a realization and asked the Dark Naruto, "Is that how you see the world?" As though it had heard the silent query, the Dark Naruto grinned. "I'm not sure what to think of what you are at the moment, but I do realize that you are an aspect of what I must feel on some level, and since you are a part of me, I care for you too as I would for my own self," Naruto said softly as a pair of arms wrapped around it from behind. Naruto had been crying silently ever since he had been forced to see his memories from this age to his date of birth and had recovered. At Naruto's words, the Dark Naruto's eye widened. "Let go of me," it yelled, but in spite of its words, Naruto's dark emotions appeared to dissolve into the embrace. However, it seemed to be losing the existence it had struggled so hard to preserve, and it startled the boy by releasing his hold. The construct trailed off as it started to bring the blade forward, and Naruto could see tears welling up in its eyes. It spun a wind blade in its hand and yelled, "Do you think that's all it would take? You spouting some nonsense about existence and company operation to make me go away? I won't." However, Hashirama grabbed it by the neck from behind before it could strike, and almost before it could react, the Dark Naruto exploded into red and blue chakra as it was gradually absorbed by Naruto. What did you two do?" asked Lady Mito, who was taken aback by the abrupt conclusion. "He merely reabsorbed the chakra he had managed to gather since the day of the sealing or his birth. I just temporarily calmed it for Naruto to do so," Hashirama said, bringing the hand he had used to grasp the dark aspect of Naruto towards Naruto's stomach. "But what about? Well, him. I think he just wanted a chance to exist to experience," Lady Mito said, sensing that they were both hiding something. "Lady Mito, the matter has been resolved," Naruto replied. "It was only a single small aspect of my personality unable to feel anything but the negative emotions that I needed to crack the seal. Those emotions exist in me, yes, but not to the extent it would have wanted you to believe." Lady Mito doubted that Hashirama and Naruto took their words seriously, but she nodded and agreed with them because the alternative would be to unleash a darkness inside Naruto once more. End of flashback. Naruto exhaled deeply. He was aware that only a portion of the issue had been resolved. He was about to confront his inner demon once more. He had been fortunate that instead of entering with guns blazing, he had followed his instincts. They had prevented him from repeating the cycle of battling his aspect and then discovering the truth. It wasn't funny because it was so cliched. He had just tried to control his emotions for that reason. However, he realized that he had to calm his friend's anxieties. Or, more accurately, Naruto favored them as his valued people. He resisted the urge to smirk as he looked at Anko, who was giving him a heated glare. The woman's expression softened as she said, reminiscing again, "Aren't you Naruto-kun? I hope you have finished your wool gathering because we still have work to do." It must have been some of his humor. After giving a nod, Naruto reverted to his stoic demeanor. He lifted a hand seal, shaped the necessary chakra, and visualized his desired outcome. He didn't want to harm the temple of Uzumaki either. His tone was barely audible above a whisper as he said, "Doden. Retsudatensho, Earth Release. Split Earth Turnaround Palm." In exactly the way he had imagined, a half-kilometer long strip of overgrown vegetation flipped over and turned around, leaving behind a bare, pristine clearing. The land surrounding the Uzumaki temple and the monument remained intact, despite the fact that the piece of land he had turned was almost square in shape. As the technique came to an end, he let the remaining chakra return to his system with a gentle exhale. He turned to see Anko grinning and giving him the thumbs up. Then he heard a slow clapping and turned to see Lord Hashirama glaring at him proudly while clapping softly. "Good work, Naruto. Although you initially molded more chakra than necessary, you will reach that point with practice." Hashirama grinned at his protege before turning back to examine his handiwork. "The rest appears to have been done perfectly, but it appears that I have some work to do. Stand back and let me show you something unique." After standing motionless for a minute, Hashirama opened his eyes abruptly. He displayed a series of facial markings that indicated he was in the sage mode. "Senpo. Mokuden. Shichuka no Jutsu," he uttered, and Naruto and Anko watched in disbelief as the scene in front of them underwent a significant transformation. Seeing the looks on his adorable little pupils, Hashirama smiled to himself. He would have loved to shout it from the top of the Hokage monument because he was so awesome. "Take that, Madara, I still have it," he mentally congratulated himself. After 2 days ground 4 for Hokage training. Sato Konohagakure standing in the training area where he had witnessed numerous significant legends hone their distinctive skills was Sarutobi Hiruzen. Both Naidame Hokage and Shodai Hokage, his teachers, contributed to the establishment of this ground and its neighbors. To make it flawless and more realistic, it boasted a sizable area covered in numerous terrains and seals. Seals for barriers and silencing were strong enough to conceal a number of S-rank tactics within the premises. When Lady Mito became enraged with Tobirama for damaging her garden, she also applied a very powerful aura-dampening seal, frightening more than half of the village into submission. The Hokage, Anbu commander, head medic, and a few other special people were the only ones who knew how to use a particular set of hand seals to open the grounds. Furthermore, only the commander and the Hokage were aware that only individuals who had been added to the seal matrix could access the grounds. He had woken up early yesterday morning after briefly sensing a huge chakra spike coming from the area around the Uzumaki clan temple. He had hurried away, believing Naruto was being attacked. He considered that to be one of his biggest mistakes and regrets because he had let Naruto down once. He would never be able to forget the image of a dirty, undernourished boy looking for food among the trash while only wearing rags. But when he got close to the clearing, he discovered that he was unable to recall the area or the temple's location. He jumped when he saw Naruto and Hinata coming out of the trees. He had discussed with them the chakra spike and his inability to locate the temple or the neighborhood. Hinata laughed, and Naruto gave him his minuscule smile before telling him the answer in a single word. Seals. The fact that 2 young teens could construct such a sophisticated array that could conceal the entire estate from his senses had baffled Sarutobi Hiruzen, and that was no small accomplishment. After his return, he had anticipated that Naruto would be a middle-level seal user rather than a high-class master like Lady Mito. He was afraid of what the woman's mind could conjure up with her seals, since she was familiar with them. He was intrigued by Anko's challenge, that both of her students would use the Anbu to clean the floor, but he was also quite skeptical of it when he got home. Hiruzen had grinned and promised to teach Anko some of his own collaboration jutsu if that occurred. However, the fact that Kurenai and Anko were so certain of their triumph had brought him a lot of wool. After shaking his head to get his mind straight, the third Hokage turned to face the training grounds and noticed that he had asked for 2 Anbu teams in addition to the Anbu commander. Danzo was also there, along with the 2 elders, Homura and Kaharu. Since his sealing, Danzo had undergone some changes. At various points, he had started to realize that his methods were dubious and incorrect. But in front of everyone, he continued to project an inflexible, unforgiving image. Although Sarutobi detested being Danzo's puppet, he persevered because he had steeled his heart. The elders all grinned at his dramatics when he arrived with a traditional leaf shunshin between them. He even received a ghostly smile from Danzo, the hard ass. Sarutobi was aware that was all he could get from Danzo at this point. Hiruzen, I have a proposition for you for today's match, or you can say recruitment. I have a root team on standby. I wish for these two upcoming genins to be tested against my root with your approval, I might say, Danzo said, tapping his cane on the ground. This surprised both elders, but Hiruzen hardly batted an eye. Kurenai had not yet arrived, but Anko, being his bold, normal self, said, that is fine. I might say it good enough for them. If these two are to go out, then they should know the situations where the odds are heavily stacked against them. Hiruzen felt a little uneasy about Anko's confidence, or rather, his overconfidence, and refrained from rejecting the request to Danzo. Granted, no killing or life-threatening situations though. Danzo nodded to the shadows, grinning, after putting on a show of thoughtful consideration. 4 members of the Root Shinobi team showed up with tontos and white porcelain masks. Everyone's eyebrows went up when Naruto and Hinata appeared in the clearing in a shunshin a few minutes later. Both of them made a striking impression with their eye-catching dresses while donning their Warring Clan-era armor. You don't see 2 kids who aren't yet genin using a chunin level technique and wearing war gear very often. The Sandames smiled as they nodded and bowed their heads slightly. Along with his entourage, Sarutobi made hand signals to seal the training area and moved to another area. He stood up straight, turned to the crowd, and said, Ladies and gentlemen of Konohagakure no Sato, today we have a special attraction for all of you. You will get to see some of the most prominent Anbu in this village pitted against 2 lone students in today's battles. The students in question are Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Hyuga, he said, pointing to the tree where Naruto and Hinata had long since gotten up and started to relax. The audience let out a collective gasp before Anko said, "Aw, shut the hell up. You miserable bastards. Yes, he is back and he is not dead. Show some respect and faith in the Sandames and the Yondaime's knowledge and wisdom." She did this by projecting her own voice using the same technique that Sarutobi had used. Hiruzen wet his pants at Anko's method of, right, well then, the rules will be as follows. A team bowed between these two and one of the Anbu teams to be selected by Danzo out of the 13 teams present here. If they can defeat the opponent they are matched with, they will be matched up with the next team, and last there will be a surprise team, until they are either defeated or run through them all. He smiled as he finished. The proctor for the bouts will be Nara Shikaku and Inochi Yamanaka. He gestured for someone to approach, and both men approached from the rear, observing the Anbu whose bouts they would be officiating. All right, Uzumaki-san. You've been the talk of the shinobi since you've returned, and Sandame seems to trust you. Let's see what you've got, Inochi said, turning to face Naruto, who was still stretching. Staring back at the first Anbu team in front of them were Naruto and Hinata. The team members' skepticism and barely concealed joy were palpable to Naruto. He gave Hinata a small nod as she looked at him. She smiled simply, and her face transformed into the ice-cold mask, which caused Sarutobi and Danzo to raise an eyebrow. In contrast, Naruto's face appeared to be carved out of stone. They both let their pure chakra seep out and blend with the surroundings. Despite not seeing or feeling anything, Inochi sensed something in the atmosphere because he was a sensor. He exclaimed, "Hajime," and they both jumped back. Together, Naruto and Hinata applied pressure on the Anbu and released their killing intent. All of the shinobi and other Anbu teams were visibly tense, and to others, it seemed as though a chilling wave of death had struck the ground. The entire body of Naruto and Hinata was leaking a murderous aura that pulsed menacingly, and their faces had hardened. The oppressive aura in the air caused the Anbu team to appear as though they were about to collapse due to the obvious strain on their masks. And it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. A number of the shinobi in attendance exchanged anxious looks with one another, troubled by the ease with which 212-year-olds could unleash such intense murderous intent. Hinata moved between the paralyzed team members and vanished from her position. With the exception of one team member who was too slow to avoid Hinata's deft fingers, practically the entire group dispersed as she struck out with her hands. The glancing blow left his entire left shoulder numb, and he gasped as the sensation quickly moved to his hand. With a choked scream, he leapt back, and another emerged to cover his escape. The girl dodged his blows entirely by weaving in and out of them as the second Anbu attacked her with a bakken. He heard someone approaching from behind and turned around, only to be struck by a strong blow that broke his bakken, jarred the bones in his arms, and sent him flying backwards. The now arrived Naruto turned to face Hinata, who nodded, and performed 10 hand signals at a breakneck speed. "Sweden. Baku Suishua," he yelled, and he spit out a lot of water in the direction of the shocked Anbu member. The Anbu was being carried away from the two by the water's torrent before he could blink. After going through 10 of her own hand seals, Hinata uttered the words, Riedan, Jion, and spit a powerful electric beam into the running water. As the combination attack fried his entire body and nervous system, the Anbu member could only watch in horror as the crackling water swept him into its embrace and his body sizzled. Every spectator on the training field winced as his screams reverberated. Behind his mask, the leader cast calculating glances at both children while the other 3 team members flinched in sympathy. In order to avoid humiliation in front of Konoha's top brass, he went through his own hand seals and used his own technique against them. Kaden. Goryuka no Jutsu. A number of the dragon head fireballs, which were strong enough to pierce concrete, were hurled at the 2 kids, who did nothing but vanish into thin air. Following the leader's curse, the 3 members formed a triangle, their eyes moving from one spot to another. The 3 Anbu and everyone else watching the beatdown were startled when Naruto and Hinata emerged into their formation. The 3 of them jumped away from the 2 ninjas who were undoubtedly dangerous. It was a smart move because both kids punched through the spots where 2 team members were standing, creating holes in the ground. Using Naruto's back as a support, Hinata leapt into the air before executing her own jutsu, Sweden, Sensatsu Suisho, and demonstrating the 5 hand signals. The hidden Anbu jumped out of their hiding spots as a veritable rain of water needles was hurled towards the grounds, sprinkling it with tiny holes. Like a dancer, she returned to the ground with grace. A fist went by where Naruto's head had been, and he leaned it back. He dealt with the assailant by using the Goken. In place of his opponent's textbook moves, he improvised and employed non-telegraphed moves. Nobody failed to notice Naruto's use of Goken. Both Danzo and Hiruzen observed that Naruto was superior to the Anbu he was battling with, and he received points for employing improvised katas of the Taijutsu. After dodging, Naruto launched a potent combo that overcame his opponent's hurried defense. He whispered, Riedan, Hiruzen, just before he touched his opponent. His body seized after being painfully socked, and the Anbu had frozen upon hearing the name of his technique. The image of the Yondaime Hokage superimposed on the blonde boy was the final sight of the fallen Anbu member. Before he passed out, he could only offer a feeble apology. When he saw how the Anbu teams were doing, Danzo asked Hiruzen, don't you think it is a little boring? How about adding the second team too? It will certainly give them a challenge at the very least. Hiruzen gave the Anbu commander a slight nod, and he gestured for the second team to enter the ground. Both Hinata and Naruto attacked the second team as soon as they entered the ground because they believed that the 2 teams together posed a greater threat. Using an A-rank Kinjutsu, both of them softly intoned, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, raising many eyebrows and leaving 2 academy-level students speechless. 6 clones, 2 from Hinata and 4 from Naruto, came into being. To engage the teams and put pressure on the Anbu, the clones leapt right in front of them. Shall we end this, Tsukihime? Naruto asked Hinata in his icy, melodic voice as he grinned at her. Hi. Naruto.kun, said Hinata, flushed a little. They each pulled out 2 kunai, launched them at their selected targets, and dashed at great speed in the direction of the Anbu team's team leaders. With a curse, the leaders advanced to face the originals. Alongside Hinata and Team 1's Anbu leader in the first kata of her own taijutsu style, Hinata drew herself. She then formed her fists into 2 lion heads by channeling her lightning chakra into them. She attacked her opponent without waiting for him, launching herself at him and hitting his chakra network with strong yet accurate blows that caused the visibly unprepared man to jump back to avoid being pounded. Both of them danced for a few minutes. More specifically, Hinata danced while her opponent attempted in vain to avoid being hit by hopping around like a frog. He winced when the young Hyuga girl's hands touched his body, shocking him and numbing that area. It seemed like every move he made gave her fresh chances to take advantage of. He employed every tactic imaginable, but the girl persisted in her quest. With the exception of trying to block her attacks with his own kunai, she never let him put distance between them or let his hands free. Hinata was aware that both she and her opponent were growing weary of the battle. She was being made to fight for other people like a performer when all she wanted to do was go home and cuddle with her Naruto.kun. She saw the man attempting to channel chakra into his hands for some genjutsu and flared her Byakugan. She would not permit this to occur. She arrived with a sudden burst of speed, directing her chakra to her legs, leaving her opponent vulnerable to her attacks. She drew them across his stomach and over his right shoulder, switching from her Raiden chakra to her preferred chakra scalpels. The impact was immediate. When the Anbu saw the girl appear in front of him, he let out the breath he had been holding in relief. She touched him, but her hands were not covered in the chakra that had literally shocked him every time. From behind his mask, he grinned. Despite her talent, the girl's chakra pools were small. He would now demonstrate to her the power of a Konoha Anbu. He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he raised his hand absently to block her next blow, failing to notice the faint glow of her hands as they used chakra no Mesu. However, because of her own limited experience as a medical ninja, Kaharu, who had grown quite intrigued when the girl started using ninjutsu, noticed it right away and was greatly impressed by the young girl's ability to switch up her attacks between strikes and use medical techniques. She started to pay closer attention to see what would happen next. When the Anbu member's muscles failed to obey his commands during the fight, he felt as though someone had cut the strings of his right shoulder, which caused his relief and smugness to turn to panic. He felt nothing at first as the girl's hands brushed across his stomach, but then all of a sudden he was hit by the strongest abdominal pain he had ever experienced. It was as though someone had suddenly charged all the nerve clusters in his stomach to explode. With a choked scream, he fell to his knees and then kicked up his stomach contents on the floor. Fortunately, Hinata used only her bare hands and not the chakra scalpels, or else she might have decapitated him from the inside. She took a chance and spun around behind him, knocking him unconscious with a simple chop to the neck. Many people in the room laughed when the man passed out in his own vomit. Alongside Naruto and Team 2's Anbu leader, without considering that she might be entering an ambush, Naruto arrived on the ground with the Anbu member in pursuit. As soon as the boy stopped, the team commander led 10 Doden Bunshin form, which then dispersed in a little puff of smoke that represented a cage Bunshin. Shit. I have walked into a trap. The Anbu swore to herself before tensing up when she heard a chilly, melodic laugh and saw the boy she was looking for come out of the darkness with a composed, unagitated appearance. The woman kept a close eye on him and was aware of her surroundings in case this was all part of the setup. When Naruto thought the woman could see him clearly enough, he stopped walking. But he moved quickly, bending at the waist, and the woman and the clones all tensed. He lifted his head and grinned icily, saying, "Good morning, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. Please treat me well. I shall be your opponent for this fine morning." As he removed his chain and sickle and assumed the whirlpool stance, the woman gave him a look. Since she was certain that her face was cherry red, the woman blushed and thanked the gods that it was concealed by the mask. Naruto Uzumaki, a resident of Jinchuriki, Konoha, who vanished 2 years ago, gave her a glimpse of his now handsome face after the boy took off his face mask. She had simply been oblivious to the boy's presence. She had never harbored hatred for him. He had piercing blue eyes that resembled frozen glaciers, and the smile made her feel all mushy inside. Since he hadn't displayed any emotion since the fight started, she briefly believed he was a root ninja. "Do you mean to tell us that you are going to fight me and my clones alone?" Naruto raised his eyebrows. "Ha ha ha ha, what kind of confidence you have?" He remained unfazed and kept waiting for the woman to pull out her sword. The woman, who laughed again, said, "Whatever, are you here ready to fight and lose?" Naruto said, "As you wish, let us begin," and disappeared from the woman's and her clone's view. He shocked the woman by entering the formation right away, and before she could react, he had already joined the first group of 4 clones. After they had established that there was only one enemy and that he was a stupid one, they parted ways. If a man with nothing but a sickle and chain charged directly into 10 people, how foolish could he be? Maybe she would have some fun with him after pointing out his mistakes. When Naruto got to the first clone, she swiped a kunai at his face. He ducked under the weapon and swung his sickle around the clone's wrist. Once the maneuver was finished, he shifted, and the clone swung the kunai again, slashing around the clone's chest so that the chain at the end came back at him as he flipped over another aggressor who was coming from behind. The sickle then plunged into her stomach, disemboweling her as Naruto pulled on the chain, cutting the last clone in half and removing her hand. In the next instant, he used his left foot to tension the chain to block a kunai strike from his left and whip the other end to deflect a shuriken from his right. He continued by bringing up the chain to block an incoming downward strike with a sword. Then, he whipped it around his head as the sickle at the end tore into the throat of the clone wielding the sword. With a quick flick of his wrist, he wrapped the chain around the neck of the final clone in the group, blocking her head to his left. As the other 5 clones disengaged and regrouped, Naruto took a new stance. This time, the chain was on the floor behind him, still attached to the sickle, which he held upside down at his hip with his left hand and over his left shoulder. His forearm protected his face, and his body was twisted so that the enemy could only see his side. "What the hell is this?" replied the woman. "We can't get at him from any direction or angle, and if we attack in groups it makes little difference." "Alright, listen up," said a replica. "I have an idea. His chain is not long enough for a long distance." The other clone heard something humming in the air and yelled, "Get down!" As it returned innocuously to its owner, who caught it with ease and reattached it to his chain, the sickle that whirled through the air hardly missed them. The first clone stood up and assumed a defensive position, exclaiming, "Damn, he can detach that sickle and throw it." The original said, "Shit, that means he can cover close, medium, and far range." The first clone acknowledged, "Hey, I guess I underestimated his strength," adding that he was capable of fighting at close, medium, and far range. As he hopped over sickle, the final clone asked, "So what do we do?" He has already killed 5 of 10 clones. "We attack at all 3 distances." What? His attack is flawless with those things, but they don't allow for much defense. I see, if we attack from all 3 distances and at all directions he can't possibly defend against all the attacks. O whispered, "Right," the original acknowledged, "Reform on me." The original said, "May I ask you a question, Naruto-san, to give herself more time?" "You may, but depending on the question I may not be able to answer." "That is fine," replied the Anbu. "Where did you learn such skills? I have never seen a person change in 2 years that much unlike you." With an internal smirk, he replied simply, "I am an Uzumaki." "What do you mean by that? I cannot answer that." She muttered, "It was worth a try." "That's fine," she grinned, "now prepare to lose, you fool." The woman who was conversing with him simultaneously hurled a barrage of kunai and shuriken at him as a stone dragon flew up behind him from a great distance. Stone covered fists simultaneously came from the left and right, and a shower of tennis ball sized stones descended from above. They were scheduled to arrive on targets just a few seconds ahead of each other. Naruto dropped to one knee and started destroying one-handed seals faster than anyone could see, startling the woman who was watching with wide eyes. As 4 clones, Shishi Engine, spoke softly and appeared without any hand seals, he channeled his own chakra. A rectangular box of violet flames was formed by the 4 barrier clones. As soon as it was formed, the formation just let the walls of flame burn the clones and disintegrate all the ninjutsu. All the woman could do was watch as her plan fell apart. The woman who stopped her attack exclaimed, "What the hell is that? It looks like a barrier-type ninjutsu." Ignoring the question, Naruto remarked, "What will you do? There are only 2 of us now." She threw a smoke bomb to conceal her hurried escape, and she was able to get a few feet away before a sickle stopped her, and the chain exploded from the ground, ensnaring her and holding her in place. "Please accept my apologies, but until this is over you are my prisoner," he said as he approached her. "You shall remain harm-free if you refrain from struggling and comply with my words." She made a fruitless attempt to break free from the chain and inquired, "How did you get here before us?" Then he knocked her unconscious and let one of his clones take her away, saying, "There is no mystery, just a simple substitution. Now sleep." Danzo gave his team a nod, and they immediately joined the battle. Hinata appeared to have been anticipating them a little earlier. However, Naruto used a shunshin to get between the 2 groups before anyone could even move. He glanced back at Hinata over his shoulder and spoke in a whisper, to which Hinata nodded. He then turned to face Danzo's men. It had been extremely late for the Anbu teams until the root shinobi arrived at the grounds, and their clones had successfully defeated their targets. After giving their creators a quick glance, the clones vanished as if they had never existed, returning their memories to them. Naruto was aware that these root shinobi posed a greater threat than the typical Anbu. According to his sensor abilities, nearly all of them were at mid-Junin levels and, based on their emotions, were skilled at cooperating with one another. He made the decision to stop the fight right away and go speak with the Hokage about a thought that had crossed his mind the previous evening. He muttered, "Kanashibari no Jutsu," and the Anbu were instantly immobilized. Using an A-rank advanced genjutsu, Hinata, on the other hand, performed a few hand seals and exclaimed, "Nihon Shoja no Jutsu," drawing admiring glances from everyone. The exam ended when the root Anbu fell asleep because they were unable to dispel the genjutsu because the Kanashibari had paralyzed them all. With the exception of a few exceptions, such as the Sannin or cages, Naruto had purposefully added a significant quantity of pure chakra enhanced by his own Uzumaki chakra, making it impossible for any other ninja to escape the technique. An astonished Inochi exclaimed, "Winners are Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Hyuga." Shikamaru, standing next to him, gave a silent mendokusai while narrowing his eyes and observing the 2 so-called prodigies. With a very joyful voice and a clear sense of pride, Sarutobi Hiruzen exclaimed, "Well done. Excellent. You 2 have made me very proud, Naruto-kun and Hinata-san. Come stand here in front of me." The skills displayed by 2 aspiring shinobi left everyone in awe and stunned. If Anko's beaming was any indication, she appeared extremely content and joyful. Kurenai, on the other hand, was pouting a little when the match ended abruptly. She hoped to witness more of her pupils in action. The third Hokage laughed at Hinata and Naruto's antics when they appeared in front of him after disappearing. Other people couldn't help but be shocked by these two's strength. After just 2 years of training, Koharu wanted to know how much their growth had increased. Homura shared this sentiment, but he was more concerned about the ridiculous demands of the civilian council. Danzo, on the other hand, appeared to be thinking deeply and was not upset about his team losing so quickly. They wanted to join the Anbu Corps, according to the Anbu commander. Morino Ibiki was paying close attention to the two kids and was curious about how they behaved. Rumors circulated among the current Anbu teams regarding the competencies that these two need to have in order to easily defeat 3 Anbu-level teams. It was a given that by midday, everyone would be aware of the reports of their performance. You have made me and your teachers proud, both of you. I hereby declare you two. Hiruzen paused as Danzo interrupted his speech by tapping his cane on the floor. Everyone at the academy raised an eyebrow when he said, I would like that our Hokage may confer on them the title of Elite Genin and permission to either skip academy and maybe join Anbu. It will be a waste of such talent to be squandered in academy. Koharu and Homura, the elders, also nodded in agreement with Danzo. The commander of Anbu nodded as well. Kurenai and Anko, meanwhile, stared at them as though they were crazy. Young children shouldn't be deployed to combat zones at such a young age, regardless of their level of Junin. This type of stress was exemplified by Itachi. Hiruzen squinted at Danzo, wondering if his old friend was trying to court these two. Danzo merely shook his head in response to the Hokage's stare, preventing anyone else from observing their nonverbal communication. With a sigh, Hiruzen nodded to himself, realizing that his logic was sound despite Danzo's status as a shinobi without Yami. He looked at Danzo and nodded, essentially indicating that they would speak later. Danzo took note and gave a small smile in return. Yes, I agree with Danzo. Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Hyuga, both of you were granted the title of Elite Genin and may choose to skip academy and join the ninja forces. Also, both of you can apply for apprenticeships under any person but after consulting your guardians. You may inform me of your decisions next week. Till then, I believe that you had something for me. Naruto.kun. Sarutobi replied. As the Anbu teams started to retreat and discuss this most recent development, Naruto nodded and spoke. Koharu, Homura, and Danzo all left, but Danzo looked at Naruto and Hinata almost quizzically. Yes. I and Hinata would like to welcome you to our new clan compound and add you into the SEAL matrix. So will you be willing to join us for a late lunch today? Naruto answered with an icy tone. Anko, Kurenai, and Hinata were just behind them, whispering to one another as Hiruzen grinned and nodded, saying, Lead the way, Naruto.kun. For some reason, Kurenai appeared somewhat upset. Ignoring them, Naruto disappeared in a shunshin, while others followed suit with their own shunshins. The clan compound of Uzumaki outskirts, Konohagakure no Sato. Sarutobi Hiruzen was a few seconds behind Naruto when he arrived. After a few seconds, Hinata, Anko, and Kurenai arrived, interrupting the venerable third Hokage's observations as he surveyed the area and attempted to recall their location. Naruto pulled a big scroll from a seal on his forearm and said, I need you to pump your chakra into this seal and I would like a sample of your blood. Examining the kanji, Sarutobi Hiruzen discovered that it was a tiny key that would allow him to enter the clan compound's barriers. He nodded and complied with his fictitious grandson's requests. He then observed Naruto nod as if he was satisfied before performing a number of one-handed seals quickly enough that even he thought they were blurs. For a brief period, a dome of chakra was visible. It flashed and pulsed 3 times in succession before momentarily glowing. After experiencing a chilling sensation, the third Hokage vanished. Suddenly, as if a veil were being lifted from his eyes, he could see past the trees to a tall wall and a set of big gates bearing the emblem of the Uzumaki clan. He took a closer look around before sensing the clan compound's strong barriers. Even the Hokage mansion lacked such strong barriers, and they appeared to be very intricate. Welcome Hokage Sama, to the Uzumaki compound, my own home, Naruto said with a smile before addressing him formally. He walked forward with Naruto and entered the clan compound, laughing at the formal tone Naruto was using. He had just begun to believe that he had seen enough when he abruptly realized that there weren't many trees in front of him. He was now overlooking a lovely forest clearing with a large, glistening lake on one side and a sprawling clan compound with tall walls around it at the other. There were also several large training yards and small sheds tucked away in various spots throughout the expansive grounds, as well as a variety of rare and exotic trees and fruit trees. Additionally, there was a garden that appeared to have recently been planted. Overall, the atmosphere was very friendly and inviting, and even the buildings themselves seemed to have a certain charm. It simply appeared to be a location where people could come and relax, releasing all of their stress and worries at the door. The Hokage had unconsciously relaxed rather than maintained his customary tense, anxious expression. It was nearly as big as the compounds of Hyuga and Uchiha. He had been following Naruto the entire time, and there he was at the door. After doing something to the door, Naruto opened it and vanished inside the spacious space he called home. Unless his eyes were deceiving him, he was certain that the entire compound had simply shimmered. Since he appeared to have even greater security than Enbu HQ, Naruto was very paranoid and needed to speak with him. Additionally, he might purchase a few security barriers for his own workspace. Sarutobi Hiruzen quickly discovered that he was enjoying the traditional decor as he made his way deeper into the house. At the very least, he thought that Naruto and Hinata had good taste. He noticed the enormous paintings that appeared to be from the Uzumaki lands, if his guess was correct, as soon as he found himself in a spacious sitting room. After pointing to the big cushions and requesting that he take a seat, Naruto excused himself, with Kurenai trailing behind. After following instructions, he sat down in a pile of cushions a short distance from Kurenai and Anko and struck up a conversation with them. He saw that the two women were sitting in seiza and appeared to be very at ease. An examination of the building's architecture revealed that it was skillfully planned and constructed to have an attractive appearance. When Naruto showed up, the Hokage moved to keep a close eye on his fictitious grandson. Naruto was dressed in white pants, a mesh undershirt, and a high-collared kimono with crimson and white stripes. He carried a tray filled with a few bottles of what looked like sake and several cups, and he made a striking figure. Kurenai was standing behind him, her beauty highlighted by her bright crimson cheongsam Chinese dress, which was cut high up to her pelvis. She also had a tray with what looked like tea on it. They both took a seat, and the room became quiet. With a smile, Naruto offered them tea first, followed by sake. As Kurenai and Anko each picked up a saucer of sake, Hiruzen took the tea and watched as Naruto and Hinata followed his lead. When he took a sip, his eyes widened at the unique flavor that Lady Mito loved so much. He gave Naruto a questioning glance, and the boy in question grinned before pointing to Hinata, who was seated among them and appeared to be a true member of the royal family. Her eyes were glistening with joy, and she appeared to be at ease as she gazed at Naruto, who was also grinning, albeit not as broadly as he had in his youth. This was a far cry from a little girl with ice-cold attitude and frozen lavender orbs for eyes, since he could see pictures of Lord Hashirama with Lady Mito and Minato with Kushina instead of the current young couple. Sarutobi thought that perhaps these two were meant to be. After a few minutes of comparatively quiet silence, Naruto said, "Thank you Gigi for giving me a chance." Sarutobi responded that he owed it to his parents and that there was no issue. "I and Hinata would like to get enrolled as secret Enbu working underneath you only for the next 3 years. We know that you are against the idea of child soldiers, but we both need money for our new clan treasury. I know I have a lot of inheritance money from my parents and clan savings, but I would like to earn my upkeep. Same is the case for Hinata. What do you think of it, Lord Hokage?" Sarutobi gave him a pained expression and brushed it aside. "Don't you think it is too early for you to know blood and guts, Naruto-kun? I know that I might be speaking a bit harshly, but I would like you to have a bit of childhood. You should be making friends and playing with children, not making career-influencing conditions. I do not deny your request, but I would like you too to consider my words," he said with sadness. Hinata giggled into her sleeve as Naruto grinned. Seeing the Hokage looking at them strangely, Anko spoke up, "It is not that Hokage-sama, but both of these two are going to join the academy and also work as Anbu. I know it will be a bit hectic, but these two will only do 20 missions per 2 months and they can decline or accept the missions. Also, no report of their activities as Anbu are to be known to anyone. They are going to be your personal shadows and assistants. Naruto has often told you that he wishes to be Hokage. This is how he will be trained for the job, by observing you and learning to emulate you. Hinata has wished to be an advisor and she will be helping you as an advisor while she is learning about politics from you. These activities can be hidden as clan issues just like the Uchiha and Hyuga do. Last 2 years were eye-opening for us. This is our decision for what you have prepared for us, and we are ready for our presence to be felt." Although Sarutobi appeared somewhat shocked, he quickly understood what they were saying. Naruto would need to put in a lot of effort to gain the respect of civilians because he was not well liked by them. However, they did not want to waste the time and effort required for that. Hinata and Naruto were getting ready for the future. Sarutobi was amazed that he had never considered that for his own son and grandson. He saw the advantages of their foresight and preparation. Everyone makes rash, prepared decisions these days. However, these four had already considered their obligations and future. He could see the will of fire blazing brightly within each of them. When he looked back, he saw how far they had come from their issues. He always wanted his ninjas to be like this. After giving it some more thought, he said in a firm voice, "Hi." Permission granted, to which they all merely grinned. 1 year later, somewhere in Yu no Kuni's territory. Like the hounds of hell pursuing them, 5 figures dashed across the forest grounds. In addition to their Kumogakure no Sato ninja village costume, each of them wore a stylized mask adorned with lightning symbols. As if that weren't enough, they were all sporting headbands adorned with the Kumo symbol. The figures were fleeing their unsuccessful attempt to steal an information scroll that held some secret information about the fire daimyo and his court. After what felt like hours of non-stop running, they came to a stop at an open clearing. One of them suddenly stiffened, but before he could say anything, they were all shifting from where they had been as 7 extremely compressed and dense balls of water moved across the clearing, missing their targets and using their strength to break trees and leave craters in their wake. Immediately, all of the Kumo ninja formed up, and after what seemed like an eternity, 3 hooded figures with Konoha headbands and Anbu masks entered the clearing. The final figure was obviously female due to her curvaceous and lush body, but the other 2 figures were small and hardly resembled teenagers. To avoid an erection, several of the men in the group had to hold their breath. "Why are you after us? We don't have anything for you, and none of us attacked you, so will you allow us to leave peacefully?" the leader said, his posture cautious and exhausted. "Oh, how bold of you. Do you take us for fools? We know that one of us managed to copy a part of the document and its code, and we will retrieve it at all costs. Surrender it peacefully and we will allow you to go, but I want to fight and hope that you don't cooperate. I just want to shed some blood from you all." The older female spoke up, her husky, highly amused voice sending shivers up the spines of all the men except her own teammate. The second, shorter female palmed her face before slapping her ass, eliciting a small squeal of delight from the older female and an audible sigh from their only male companion. Speaking in a sultry and mischievous tone, the older woman said, Usagi, all you had to do was ask if you wanted to play with my older body, but I want him too with us." She pointed to their lone male companion, who sighed once more. A brief outburst of incredibly powerful killing intent erupted from the young female, now known as Usagi, and she growled a little, sending shivers down everyone's spines. "Not here, hubby. Taiko." She looked at the Kumo nin, who all stepped back from the now unmistakably irate female. The ground around her cracked and cratered a little, and an unearthly silence spread across the clearing as someone spoke in a voice that sounded like frozen glaciers. With a sigh, the male member of their group formed a seal with one hand. The Kumo ninja's entire field of vision abruptly disappeared, and they were all defeated by the Kokwangyo no Jutsu, bringer of darkness technique, Genjutsu. To counter what appeared to be a minor illusion, the Kumo ninjas instantly started hurling different elemental jutsus and some even used their chakra. The Naidame Hokage created this Genjutsu, which was very difficult to break. "Do your work, hubby. Taiko, and let us go. We will deal with you afterwards. Also, get ready for running back immediately, for I sense a Jinchuriki or a cage level person along with 2 other persons, both of them mid-Anbu level, arriving at our location in 15 minutes. Let us go for the trapped or going for a massive blind attack from their gathering of chakra," spoke to the male member of their group. After glancing at the trapped figures in front of them, his red streaked mask turned toward the direction he believed the reinforcements were coming from. Usagi nodded as she went through a few hand seals and nodded to their leader, who sighed slowly but breathily before leaping right into the battle and simultaneously taking out her tanto and katana. They both watched as their team leader quickly dispatched 3 individuals by slashing and cutting into their bodies, leaving them with clean, precise wounds that instantly killed them. The fact that she had used a rare poison composed of belladonna, 3 different kinds of snake venom, and a few other mixtures was also significant. The poison was a neurotoxin, which within 5 minutes of injection paralyzed the nerves, damaged all the nearby nerves, and stopped the heart. With a hand seal, the male halted his genjutsu and unleashed another just you on the remaining Kumo team members. "Futon. K's senbon," he said, before launching 2 senbon at their heads. Due to their severe genjutsu related disorientation, neither of the Kumo ninjas was able to defend themselves. They were instantly killed when the wind's invisible and lethal senbon pierced through their foreheads. They fell to the ground, their bodies crumpling. Usagi unleashed her technique, Kaden Dai Enden, and exhaled a steady breath of hot flames on the bodies of the Kumo ninjas to remove the evidence as hubby leapt back after removing all the scrolls from the slain ninjas. 5 Kumo ninjas' burning bodies in a desolate clearing were left behind after the 3 ninjas finished their work. When reinforcements arrived, they discovered only ash and 5 separately stored headbands as evidence of their fallen comrades. When she discovered her allies dead, Matabi no Nibi's Jinchuriki erupted in rage. She promised to track down the culprits and get revenge for the other ninjas who had been killed. Her team merely bowed their heads in grief over their passing. Ultimately, they merely gathered the headbands and returned to their cage to inform him that the mission had failed. After 2 days Hokage Tower and Konoha currently, Sarutobi Hiruzen was engaged in combat with one of his most formidable foes. Sitting in his office, he was being held captive by mountains of paperwork that appeared to have increased once more this week as a result of demands from numerous nations, villages, powerful individuals, and a good number of nobility. The Kami no Shinobi would be paying attention to most of these requests, but upon closer inspection, it would be clear why he appeared a little irritated. The most frequent requests and demands were for Squad 1 to accompany the missions. However, in order to eliminate his most promising squad, Danzo and his Root Division processed and filtered some requests that appeared to be very genuine and discovered that they were fake or forged requests. During the early stages of the Second Shinobi War, Tobarama Sensei had been the driving force behind Squad 1. They were a group of extremely skilled shinobi whose existence was concealed from everyone, including the ninja force commander. Only the Hokage and one other individual, typically the heir apparent to the Hokage seat, were subject to their authority. They never answered to any authority and were never held responsible. Overall, they served as Root's processors. They served as the Hokage's personal assassins and mostly took on high-level missions. Following the conclusion of the Third Shinobi War, Hiruzen stopped the practice, and the post remained unfilled until Naruto and Hinata made their requests to him, along with a number of other bribes. Along with a bag of specially made tobacco that he currently smokes, the 5 bottles of one of the most intoxicating sakes he has ever tasted were under multiple security seals, rivaling even the secret collection of Jiraiya's privately donated Icha books. Sarutobi loved his comforts just as much as any other man, and the 4 of them were aware of this and typically benefited greatly from it. At that time, Hinata Hyuga, Anko Mitarashi, Kurenai Yuhi, and, last but not least, Naruto Uzumaki. Senju made up Squad 1. He was choking on his pipe when he discovered that Naruto was somehow descended from Hashirama Senju, the Shodai Hokage and the village's founder, who had left the Leaf Village with his second student, Senju Tsunade, vowing never to return. Tsunade, the Senju clan's current head and presumably its only survivor, had been absent from Konoha for almost 15 years, so Naruto was supposed to step in as head of the clan until she returned. All property, rights, and titles were moved into his name. Additionally, Naruto's name was listed on all of the Fire Daimyo's holdings and lands under his guardianship that belonged to the Uzumaki clan until a legitimate heir could be found. After undergoing medical testing, Naruto was officially named Naruto Uzumaki Senju. He was also given 2 votes on the Konoha Council and a senior position as the head of the Senju and Uzumaki clans upon reaching the age of 15. Naturally, Naruto had previously discussed and received blessings from the kind daimyo of the Hai no Kuni, who ordered all of this. Hiruzen Sarutobi laughed to himself as he recalled that day with fondness. When he took the seats after he turned 15, he discovered that Naruto was excitedly awaiting the opportunity to ruin the lives of the civilian council. He was thinking about Naruto and Hinata's dual lives and their works at the moment. Although they were both enrolled in academy, they hardly took part in any tests. He had already heard complaints about them from a number of teachers, but he had only inquired about their evaluation. It wasn't difficult for Hinata and Naruto to defeat any simple academy student because they could easily defeat Chunin and any of the teachers on any given day. They consistently outperformed their rivals, giving the impression that they weren't even trying. After a taijutsu battle with Hinata Hyuga, who had easily defeated him and been extremely cruel to him after he used a ninjutsu in the spar, Sasuke Uchiha had already been admitted to the hospital with multiple broken bones and ruptured muscles. None of the teachers had mentioned anything other than adding a brief note for a disciplinary action against her because everyone knew she was the Hyuga heiress prior to the trip. After almost 2 years in Anbu, he thought of his squad and grinned with satisfaction at how well they were both handling their lives and maintaining their sanity. His personal summons and tasks, including the unpleasant black ops, were handled by them. Before Kurenai informed him that these 2 had already been bloodied and had committed their first murders in a safe setting, he had been reluctant to go on assassinations. After blowing the smoke from his new pipe, which Naruto had given him, he smiled and spoke softly after hearing 4 gentle puffs and 4 tattoos that burned in recognition. "I suppose something happened, didn't it?" he asked, turning to face the entire squad in all their splendor. Both their Konoha Hite.8 and their masks shone in their black hues. One of them put his hand on the floor after going through multiple hand seals after they nodded. Every area of the office glowed white as kanji spread across the floor. All four of them took off their masks to reveal their faces to their leader, and the office was secured. Anko stepped forward and spoke after bowing to him. The scroll was recovered safe and sound. However, a specialized team of Kumo shinobi managed to reach the objective first and copied a part of the scroll. Thankfully the scroll was encrypted and they did not pass the message to anyone. We pursued and eliminated the team and recovered the scroll. However, Naruto found some troubling information from a clone he allowed to stay back for spying. Sarutobi said, "Well, care to tell me Naruto-kun, your findings?" Naruto broke through his icy, uncaring mask with a small smile. Hiruzen sighed to himself that although Naruto was still emotionally invested, he still felt pain for his surrogate godson in this way. Kumo's second Jinchuriki is a female by the name of Ni Yugito and she is already a Junin and if I am not wrong, a tactical analyst for her village despite being only 17 years old. She is the 7th in command after the list we have found on first 3 and is very close to the current Raikage along with his brother and the guardian of Kumo, Killer B. She is going to be present in the Chunin exams that are being held in Konoha with the Raikage in the finals. He responded with a soft, cold voice. This is troubling indeed. Get some rest, tomorrow is your graduation and Iruka has been asking about you both since 3 days ago. I also have something for you too, a new mission, and a rank 1 to be done in the academy. Details will be given in the evening, at 5. Till then you are dismissed. Replied Hiruzen as he reviewed the report. Kurenai said, Hokage-sama, I would like to give you this scroll as it contains some other observations I found while in the area. Also, I managed to get some details out of a few of the nobles in the area. I would like you to keep a close eye on the 4th report. You might find something worthwhile in it. Thank you for the time, Lord Hokage. A very nice day to you. Kurenai then slid over a number of scrolls before leaving the office with a shunshin. The shunshin sighed and started reading the reports, looking thoughtful and a little concerned. The clan compound of Uzumaki outskirts, Konohagakure no Sato. Clan secret vault of Uzumaki. While Hinata sat on the table reading a scroll about medical ninjutsu, Naruto studied the maps. While Kurenai was relaxing next to Hinata and letting her eyes wander from one person to another, Anko was perusing some of the more unusual poisons in the medical area, appearing somewhat ecstatic. Of them all, she appeared to be the most at ease. The maps of the elemental nations were in front of them, and Naruto was looking at them almost impassively with a slight frown on his face. They had been under a lot of stress ever since he joined Squad 1 with Hinata and his minders because they were all leading double lives every day. Naruto, who possessed a lot of chakra himself, felt worn out and exhausted these days after Kyuubi added to his already enormous Uzumaki reserves. In order to protect the Sandaime Hokage while he and Hinta attended the Ninja Academy to learn the skills they had acquired during a month of training, they had to construct 3 sets of reinforced cage bunshins every day, when they were in Konoha and not on missions. Both Kurenai and Anko went to the Hokage Tower and guarded the Hokage in his village until the afternoon. Anko then proceeded to the torture and interrogation, T&I, department, while Kurenai went to the Junin Lounge and completed some D-rank missions and possibly some C ranks in the village. Lady Mito taught them how to make 3 modified blood clones, which they left behind when they were not in the village. When the Hokage inquired about those clones, Naruto informed him that they were reinforced cage bunshin with seal modifications, but the Sandaime were unaware of this and simply assumed that. It seems that utilizing such reinforced clones made a person feel closer to their clones. They were all overdoing it, and the Sandaime was concerned. Naruto had advised him to focus more on his own paperwork and old age. After that, the elderly man had ceased speaking and appeared to be pouting glumly. Kurenai had warned him not to make fun of his elders and the elderly after Hinata had laughed. Naruto almost let out a frustrated sigh as he glanced at the map. Before returning to Konoha, he spent the final 6 months of his training with his teachers traveling with his undead teachers, asking each one to demonstrate all of their abilities and gain real world experience. After all, if a sword is never used, what good is it? With the exception of Aim and Tsuchi no Kuni, they had visited numerous nations. The Shodai Hokage discovered that someone was monitoring the entire area with a sensory jutsu involving rainfall while Aim was under lockdown. They chose not to travel to Earth Country for the simple reason that he had a deep-seated animosity toward Konoha and its Yondaime Hokage, despite the fact that the Third Shinobi War had been over for a number of years. And by simply kicking off Iwa, who had become even more intolerant of Konoha and its ninjas, they did not want to start another shinobi war. They had slain hundreds of bandits and a good number of lower-level ninjas. Their bounties had brought in a good number of millions of ryo for their future. After that, Naruto used the funds to establish a few businesses in a few villages, giving the Fire Lord a portion of their annual revenue. The Fire Lord then moved the funds into a vault in the royal capital, where he could access them whenever he wanted. The remaining funds were secured in the vault located beneath the Uzumaki clan compound, which was guarded by thousands of interlocking seals made by Lady Mito herself. The fact that it was now a safer location than the Hokage vault was telling. Naruto used people he taught to give him information in an encrypted code to build a small network of spies during his travels. The majority of them were people he had saved and who had promised to update him on local events on a monthly basis. They had learned the importance of a strong spy network from Tobirama-sensei. Nobody was aware of anyone else, and he never revealed his actual self to anyone. Ninjas gave them little to no attention because the majority of the people he knew were civilians. Naruto obtained the messages from them by summoning Karasu. Each month, Naruto called forth a large number of his crewmates, who traveled throughout the elemental nations and got in touch with his messengers or spies, who relayed the information to the summons, who would take off and then dispel after a while. Naruto received the reports from his messengers without having to leave Konoha or travel great distances. But at the moment, he was concerned about the alarming reports coming from the Ta no Kuni and Yu no Kuni regions. He believed that Orochimaru, one of the worst traitors, and the Snake Sanin were responsible. He only had sightings and rumors that suggested he was in those two countries, but he had no proof. This was problematic because the snake was close to Konoha and could easily attack it. You should give the Hokage your findings along with your suspicions, Naruto-kun. He will decide what to do and what not to do. Also, get some rest for tomorrow as our graduation in Hokage-sama's mission is not going to be simple to execute. My suspicions on who is the traitor is either Mizuki-san or that secretary, Suki-san. Either way, we will know it tomorrow. Now let us go back to the house and have some dinner, for I am starving. Hinata spoke softly. As he heard her words, Naruto grinned to himself and turned to face the girl he had attempted to ignore out of concern that she would perceive him as a monster. He was taken aback when she assured him in a strong, impassioned voice that she would support him regardless of what he did or thought. This girl was a part of his life that day, and he felt that he would be damned if he let himself fall without taking care of himself. He loved her dearly because she was his light. They all left the vault and returned to the clan compound, eager to eat and rest after their mission. He grinned at everyone in attendance before saying, "Okay. I will talk to Hokage-sama about this tomorrow after the exam. I just have a very stressful day and I'm very tired. Come on Kurenai-san, Anko-san. Let us go have some food. I think my clones must have made something for us." The morning after clan compound Uzumaki, after waking up at 5 in the morning and doing his daily warm-up and training, Naruto got dressed early the following day. His teachers had taught him to be alert and be able to function on very little sleep. However, he was too fond of using seals as barriers to detection. Since the day he activated them, his seals surrounding the clan compound had never been activated. He turned to face the mirror. Although his appearance was the same as it was every day, he felt different today. Naruto thought he might make a statement today, perhaps as a result of his nerves or the anxiety from the mission they all completed and returned from yesterday. Before they went to bed last night, Anko and Kurenai encouraged him to do well on his tests. Hinata, who was aware of his wish to avoid making too much noise in the academy like she was doing herself, also encouraged him to do so, despite the fact that they were both far ahead of all these kids. After deciding to try something new today, he had to gather his chakra and recite the phrase, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, quietly in order to prepare for the day. 7 clones materialized, each lacking the distinctive puff of smoke that demonstrated his remarkable command of Kage Bunshin. After Naruto started putting on his regular clothes that he wore to the academy, all of the clones went to work because their instructions had already been given to them when they were created. They were going to ace the graduation exam, which was today. He was dressed in black pants, anbu, issue shoes that had been modified with a steel base, and a black mesh shirt. He wore a heavily modified gray trench coat that reached his mid-thighs over his mesh shirt. Actually, Anko gave him this coat and 3 sets of it as a gift last year. While on a solo mission in Tetsu no Kuni, she had questioned Lady Mito about the majority of the seals on the coat and had a craftsman complete the work. A crimson face mask, similar to the one worn by Hitaki Kakashi, concealed his face. After that, he went into his clan's compound's armory, where he stored all 4 of their weapons. Prior to Kurenai's suggestion that they could retrieve abandoned weapons from the training grounds, particularly the Forest of Death, a training ground that served as an examination arena for various exams and anbu exercises. They had spent 2 months purchasing weapons from the weapons store. After mapping the area with their summons, they dispatched reinforced shadow clones to collect all the metals they could find and seal them in sealing scrolls made specifically for this use. Then, Naruto used a number of clones to forge their weapons of all kinds and requirements. Naruto had learned how to forge and make weapons out of scrap steel upon his arrival from the Higurashi family and a number of books and scrolls from the Uzumaki library. For a nominal fee, Naruto even provided the Higurashi with some of the more widely used weapons, including Tanto, Shuriken, and Kunai. After stockpiling his weapons, he noticed that the Senbon was running low. Next week, he will make the next batch. He also kept Hinata and Kurenai's pouches stocked. Anko was on leave today. He recalled last night that she had told him she didn't want to take her weapons pouch because she had personal work to do today, but he still filled it. Then he went into the dining room, where they were setting up the big table. Many of the dishes he had learned from his travels across the elemental nations and from the different cookbooks he had gathered had been adapted by his clones. All of the clones disappeared as soon as the table was set, and Naruto pushed down his face mask and waited for the others to get down. He was correct. Anko, who had been awake but was still sleepy, was awakened by the divine aroma of food. They all went into the dining room and took seats at the table. Hinata already wore the same theme as Naruto, with the exception that her attire was more subdued and featured white and lavender hues. Naruto glanced at Anko and Kurenai, who were both dressed in their pajamas and appeared sleepy-eyed, Anko more so than Kurenai. Kurenai was dressed in a sheer black silk gown that appeared to have been thrown over her lacy underwear in a hurry. Kurenai preferred to sleep in her panties, while Anko preferred to sleep naked, clad only in a purple bra and thong that were both too small. Naruto had grown accustomed to both of their routines. Even Hinata, who disapproved of their behavior, stopped bugging them about what she described as attempts at seduction on her Naruto-kun and only occasionally glared at them. Naruto smiled and handed the weapon pouches to Kurenai and Hinata without saying a word. Their eyes spoke louder than words, and they all started eating breakfast without exchanging words. Anko and Kurenai both understood the strength of their charges, so they didn't need any encouragement. Both Naruto and Hinata had a medium breakfast consisting of eggs, fruits, milkshake, and French toast, while Kurenai had coffee, sandwiches, cream, buns, and scones. Anko had just finished a medium-sized plate of dango, complete with red bean paste, after downing the green tea. Like Hinata to cinnamon buns and Naruto to ramen, she was hopelessly dependent on it. After leaving the clan compound, they disappeared to the academy in a shunshin. Academy of Ninjas Sato Konohagakure. Both of them arrived early at the academy's front gates so they could see Naruto and Hinata appear out of nowhere. This startled the few early arrivals and their parents, who recognized Naruto and muttered very little about him despite the fact that Naruto had covered his face with his face mask. Hinata appeared somewhat irate and revealed a tiny bit of killer intent while glaring at the people disparaging Naruto. This silenced all rumors and caused everyone to start avoiding them right away. Hinata's excessive passion and protectiveness made Naruto sigh. He was aware that the girl was completely smitten with him. He initially believed that Hinata's intense concern for him was due to the contract, but after a few days of being summoned by Karasu, he had grown tired of this idea. He was aware that Hinata was with him because she truly cared for him, not because of the contract as he initially believed. He vowed never to leave his home alone after being humbled that day. He was waiting until the evening to give her the present he believed she deserved because he had a surprise planned for her today. Naruto disregarded the hushed murmurs of his classmates and the others gathered near the school's entrance as they entered the academy together. When they finally made it to their designated classroom, they discovered that they were the first people there for the day. Shrugging his shoulders, he and Hinata moved to the one pair of seats in the back, neither of them intending to sit next to anyone, especially Sasuke Uchiha, and thus endure the awful cries of his fan club. He brought out a chair for Hinata, who grinned at his kind demeanor before cuddling up to him. In order to pass the time, he pulled out a book on a rank genjustice and started reading it, with Hinata contributing her thoughts and the lessons she had learned from Kurenai. When the door opened to let 4 people into the room, his keen senses and Hinata's Byakugan, which she flashed every few minutes, recognized the approach of a few classmates and didn't even flinch. Shikamaru and Choji were preceded by the sounds of chewing and dragging feet, and Shino arrived with a soft buzzing sound. According to their observations, the final student, who came from a civilian family, would most likely become cannon fodder in the future. Naruto and Hinata, who hadn't raised their eyes from their books since they arrived, were seated in front of Shikamaru, Choji, and Shino. After giving Naruto a quick, thoughtful look, Shikamaru simply shook his head and muttered, "Troublesome." Shino, on the other hand, actually turned to face Naruto, but the door opened again to let more students enter. As Hinata started running her hands through his long hair, which she usually braided into a ponytail, Naruto put his book away by sealing it into a storage tattoo on his arm. Looking at the now almost full class, Naruto started classifying each student into the categories he had created for them, just like he did every day. Clan heirs made up the majority of the class, with very few civilian children. The Sandaime had very high expectations and hopes for this class only. As the T&I department had discovered from a captured ninja, Naruto was also assigned the side task of identifying a traitor within the academy. Sarutobi was already concerned that someone had gotten inside the village forces, and he had suspected Orochimaru because of his occasional appearances near the boundaries of Hai no Kuni. When Hinata pushed him with her elbow, he snapped out of his reverie and saw that every student, including the resident gossip Yamanaka Ino and the banshee Haruno Sakura, had come. Sasuke Uchiha was seated next to both of them, and he appeared ready to leave the classroom due to their constant arguing. He had to roll his eyes at the Yamanaka heiress's phony performance when he glanced at her once more. Naruto, who had worn numerous masks and was skilled at reading body language, had picked it up on the first day, even though it was good enough to fool the majority of genin and few, if any, low-level chunin. He glanced at Hinata, who had her Byakugan activated and was also gazing at the girl. When Iruka finally showed up, the students fell silent in anxious expectation. Mizuki, the assistant instructor, was right behind him, holding the written portion of the academy exams in his arms. Mizuki was grinning politely as usual, but Naruto's sensor ability detected a lot of negative emotions from him. Iruka immediately got started. Well then, I see you're all quiet and eager for your graduation exams, so we'll start right away. The graduation exams will have 5 parts of 10 points each. A written exam, a weapons accuracy test, a stealth test, a taijutsu spar and finally a ninjutsu evaluation. Now, as has always been the case, all portions of the exams save the written portion will have allowances for students to gain extra credit if they wish. As each portion comes up, I will let you know how the extra credit part works. Now, for these written exams, you have 15 minutes to answer all 100 questions correctly. Now, don't feel too bad when you can't answer everything in the time given. The exams are made to be unbeatable and the record for this part of the exam has been held for over 5 decades by our very own Sandaime Hokage. That little tidbit caused many students to start whispering to each other. Iruka grinned to himself and motioned to Mizuki to distribute the tests. After he was done, he allowed the students to start. After taking a quick look at the test, Naruto started answering the right questions without hesitation because he had learned his history from the undead sadistic teachers of the era, or as Anko would say, from living with them. He had also committed the academy books to memory, so it was a minor matter for him to know the answers. He breezed through the written tests and completed them a few minutes ahead of schedule thanks to his remarkable hand-eye coordination and body speed. When Iruka and Mizuki realized Naruto was finished, they both scowled in perplexity. Even though the tests were multiple choice, he was aware of how challenging they were and how long they took to complete. After finishing a few minutes ahead of Naruto, Hinata started to observe the competition. As she observed the incredulous glances that numerous students and their examiners gave them, she sighed to herself. A certain Haruno Sakura gave her a rather feeble glare. She ignored the glare, which made the girl even more irate because she didn't know what the pink howler monkey's issue was. Mizuki asked himself, just what is the demon brat up to? His plans relied heavily on Naruto's exam bombing. He was new to the academy and had only been there for 3 months. During that time, neither Hinata nor Naruto visited the academy frequently because they had very busy schedules with missions and travels. The nonsense that was being spread throughout the village about Naruto being weak and a bad loser by some civilians who had been slandered by the blonde for some petty extortion under the guise of demon tax was true, in his opinion. His failure to take the time to look into the rumors and confirm the truth was going to be his undoing. He immediately composed himself by reasoning that Naruto must have either answered completely false information or simply omitted many questions. The plan was still in place, and Orochimaru Sama would soon grant him unthinkable power. The timer went off at the 15-minute mark, and Mizuki gathered the papers so that Iruka could begin grading. He had attempted to replace the demon brat's paper, but he was unable to locate it. Unbeknownst to him, Mizuki had been analyzing the angry-looking man's behavior, and Hinata had written a very high-ranked genjutsu on the paper. Iruka took off the genjutsu as soon as she had the papers, which changed the user's perspective. Many students complained that they were unable to complete the test and that the majority of them never made it past the 70th question. Anyo, Iruka. Sensei, you mentioned that the Sandaime had the record for the highest score in this section of the exam, but you never told us what he scored, said Haruno Sakura, who was praised as the smartest student in her year, turning to face Iruka. Iruka smiled at her and responded, I had wondered when one of you would ask. I told you not to expect too much on the exam because the highest recorded score is an 89. The majority of the pupils were obviously taken aback by that. Iruka then continued, now, the next portion is the weapons accuracy test. I want you all to follow Mizuki, who will oversee the test while I get to grading your exams. I'm sure it won't take me long. Mizuki escorted the pupils to the shooting range outside. There were 2 lines on the range, one at a measured distance from the targets, 100 yards, and the other at a distance of 150 yards. The 10 targets were cardboard cutouts in the shape of men that had been marked with unique red kill spots. Turning to the pupils, Mizuki started to explain the next phase of the examination. For the weapons and accuracy test, I will call your name and you will step up and receive 5 kunais and 5 shurikens from me. You will stand at the 100-yard line and throw at the targets down the range. Your goal is to hit as many red-marked fatal points as possible. For each kill point you hit, you get 1 point. As Iruka mentioned, there is an opportunity for extra credit here. If you want to try for extra credit, you must step up to the 150-yard line and try to hit 10 of the kill spots with only the use of shuriken. Each point you hit properly grants you 2 points, but each one you miss costs you 1. So, if you try for extra credit and hit only 6 points, you get 8 points in total. Oh, and before I forget, the targets will be in motion for the extra credit part. Now, let's begin. Abarame Shino. After receiving the weapons from Mizuki, Shino advanced to the 100-yard line and started hurling them at the targets one by one. He used kunai to hit 4 of his 5 targets and shuriken to hit 3 of them. Mizuki called the next person up after noting his score. This went on for some time, and every student up to this point has chosen not to try for extra credit. When it was Hinata's turn, she moved forward in spite of the blazing stares from the women, particularly the Uchiha fan club, who were drawn to the Hyuga heiress's rich, proportioned figure. Naruto wanted to beat his ass down when Kiba scoffed at her from the sidelines. When Kiba attempted to force the unassuming Hyuga heiress to go on a date despite her repeated refusals, Hinata had already nearly castrated him. She was on the verge of losing her temper and killing the young Inuzuka when Kiba's mother intervened to save the fool's hide. Hinata first launched the 5 shuriken, achieving 5 perfect kill spots, as she approached the 150-yard line. She paused before firing the second set of shuriken the next time, but she only managed 4 kill spots and purposefully missed the final one. Her Byakugan flashed in place of her habit, and she currently had the highest score. After noticing that the Uchiha heir was furious, she gave him a challenging smirk that only he could see. There were rumors that she was being trained as a Hyuga prodigy. These idiots were unaware that she was no longer a member of the Hyuga clan and had already departed from it informally. Hinata sneered to herself. Mizuki then called forward Kiba, who, after witnessing Hinata's performance and attempting to win over the class's female students, made the decision to attempt for extra credit. Kiba took the weapons from Mizuki and stood at the 150-yard line, charging forward to his classmates' jeering cries. The majority of the class was now silent and concentrating on Kiba. Kiba started when Mizuki turned on the mechanism that moved the targets. He received 4 kill spots after throwing the first 5 shuriken quickly one after the other. He only scored 3 out of 5 because he became overconfident and launched the final 5 weapons faster than before, despite the encouragement of the students watching. He was the top scorer at the moment, though, with a total of 11 points. He gave Sasuke a cocky grin before stomping back to his spot in line. His success served as motivation for the subsequent students, who began attempting from the extra credit line. However, none of them could perform as well as Kiba until it was Sasuke's turn to calm down after he thought a Hyuga girl, despite being the clan's heiress, was showing up. He was the center of attention for the students right away, and his fan club started supporting him. With composure, Sasuke approached the 150-yard line and took Mizuki's weapons. He hurled 5 shuriken so fast that they appeared to be thrown at the same time. He only missed the final one because the target changed at the last second, but to the surprise of the students watching, he received 4 out of 5. With a score of 14 points, he is currently at the top of the scoreboard after repeating the same action with the final 5. After noting his score and taking a quick look at his board, Mizuki called the following student: Uzumaki Naruto. Mizuki handed Naruto all 10 shuriken as he walked forward nonchalantly. He then turned to face the range, and when the students saw that he was heading for the 150-yard line, the Sasuke fan club started to make fun of him and told him not to waste his time. He stopped at the line, looked at the targets, and fired all 10 shuriken at once, paying them absolutely no attention. The clearing was filled with the sound of metal tearing through cardboard, and then the students gasped in surprise when they realized that each of Naruto's shuriken had penetrated the red spot on each target's head. As the students and Mizuki tried to comprehend what they were witnessing, a flawless score using shuriken launched simultaneously at moving targets 150 yards away. Silence descended upon the clearing. Mizuki, who was furious about this new threat to his plan, finally recovered from his shock and smiled, congratulating Naruto. Yamanaka Ino received a score of 7 out of 10 after going next and opting not to try for extra credit. After calculating her final score, Mizuki guided the class to the stealth test, which was the next exam. When they got to the students' obstacle course, they found Iruka waiting for them. Well then, why don't we continue with the tests? As mentioned previously, this test allows you to get more than the allotted 10 points. The objective of this test is to make it through the obstacle course, bypassing all the traps and obstacles set up for you and all without triggering any of the bells strung up in there. You will be graded on your speed and ability to make it through without using any chakra, triggering any bell or getting injured. Each student starts off with 15 points, and if you make it through in less than 3 minutes, without using chakra, ringing any bells or sustaining any injuries, you get to keep your full 15 points. Every 30 seconds after the 3-minute mark that passes, you lose 1 point. If you use chakra, ring a bell or sustain an injury, you lose 1 point. The record for this particular test is actually held by the Yondaime Hokage, who took 4 minutes and 19 seconds, and rang no bell to get a score of 13 points. Many students started to believe that the course would be short and that they could finish it quickly after Iruka mentioned the time limit. When he brought up the Yondaime Hokage's time, their hopes were mercilessly dashed. The course must be crazy if a legend like him could only score 13 points. Iruka stepped back and gestured for Shino to start. Shino took a barely noticeable breath before running into the off-limits obstacle course. Since the students couldn't see what was going on inside, they all fell silent and paid close attention. After a minute, they heard a bell ring, and then another one about 45 seconds later. They saw Iruka write something on his scoreboard, clearly punishing Shino. After 3 minutes, Shino was still nowhere to be found. 5 minutes after he entered, they heard a trap go off, leading many to believe he had been hurt. Shino finally came out 5 minutes and 27 seconds after the bell rang a final time. He narrowly missed scoring 7 points and sustained 1 injury from a surprise trap. Mizuki reset the course, and then the next student entered. When Hinata's turn arrived, she sprinted into the course and completed it in a record, breaking 3 minutes and 15 seconds after ringing 1 bell. With 14 points, she received the highest score and broke the Yondaime record. Everyone in the room started whispering and muttering after her performance, and they all started to look at the girl with admiration, respect, and some even fear. The Uchiha prodigy was now re-evaluating his choices and perceptions of the Hyuga heiress, whom he had mistakenly assumed to be weak after growing accustomed to her modest and reserved demeanor. The other students passed the obstacle course one by one. Kiba received scores of 6, 7, 8, and in one instance, 9 points, while the majority of them had times exceeding 5 minutes and 30 seconds. The students once again focused entirely on Sasuke when it was his turn. They were all attentive when he began, waiting to hear if he rang any bells or came across any traps. People started to believe that he might get through without ringing a bell after 3 minutes. They then heard the distinct tinkling of a bell at the 4-minute mark, which was soon followed by another. After 4 minutes and 23 seconds, Sasuke came out unscathed. He received an 11-point rating and appeared extremely irate with himself. Sasuke, clearly still irritated by Naruto's performance in the weapons accuracy test, threw a blatantly challenging sneer at Naruto as he made his way back to his line. Like almost everyone else, Naruto clearly saw the glance and dismissed it casually as he passed Sasuke on his way to the starting line. Sasuke did not like this action and had to calm down before he did something inappropriate in such a public setting. But without hesitation, Sasuke's fan club took over and began hurling insults at Naruto, with Sakura and Amy being the loudest. Naruto looked at Iruka to give him the all-clear to start, blatantly disregarding them and infuriating them even more. Iruka nodded, and he was off. Despite Naruto's performance at the weapons range, the majority of the students expected to hear bells ringing and angry yelling as they listened. They hadn't heard anything after the first minute, and people were already raising their eyebrows and exchanging incredulous looks. After 2 minutes and 58 seconds, Naruto walked out of the obstacle course without a scratch, his clothes undisturbed, and the bells still ringing. Iruka recorded Naruto's time and record, breaking score of 15 points after he had recovered from his surprise. Naruto calmly walked past a gaping Inuzuka Kiba and a perplexed Uchiha Sasuke before returning to the tree he was leaning against and taking a seat on an elevated root before it was his turn. Ino, the final student, received 8 points after Iruka called her forward. They were led to the Taijutsu sparring grounds by Mizuki and Iruka after they had compiled their results. Iruka turned to the students, most of whom were now eyeing Naruto and Hinata with something other than scorn and haughty contempt, and began his instruction. Now, I want you to listen up carefully. The next portion of the exam is a Taijutsu spar between you and Mizuki. The time limit for the spar is 2 minutes and your goal is to either defeat him or last the full 2 minutes. Each student will start out with 10 points and here's how the scoring will proceed. If a student wins before the time limit, by either knockout or knocking Mizuki out of the ring, then the amount of time left on the clock will be divided by 20, rounded down to the nearest whole number, and added to their 10 points for their final score. If a student loses before the limit, the same math occurs, but with a deduction from their 10 points for their final score. Once a student lasts past the 2-minute mark, they get their full 10 points whether they win or not. The record for this portion of the exam is a win in a time of 45 seconds, held by the Yondaime Hokage. Now, let us begin with Shino. The spar began at Iruka's signal after Shino and Mizuki entered the ring without a word. Since an academy student could normally never hope to match a chunin, it was clear right away that Mizuki was not going all out. After 1 minute and 37 seconds, Shino used his superior clan taught Taijutsu skills to finally knock Mizuki out of the ring, earning 11 points overall. Iruka congratulated him and then called out the following pupil. As a result, even though Mizuki was forgiving, only the clan children were able to defeat the students before the time limit expired. With the exception of Hinata Hyuga's entrance into the ring, when her outstanding performance prompted more murmurs and whispers. Even Iruka and Mizuki, her teachers, appeared somewhat intrigued by her performance. Hinata stepped forward, her hands already in motion to impale the person in front of her as Iruka began the match. Everyone was whispering and raising their eyebrows because she was moving at a mid-chunin level. Iruka appeared very interested in the match and was already planning to speak with the Hokage about his observations of his 2 students, who already appeared to be very advanced for this class, as soon as the exams were over. Even though Naruto and Hinata missed the classes, they never lost a battle or provided an incorrect response, so he wasn't a fool for not noticing. He turned his attention back to the match and saw, just in time, that Mizuki had already lost to the young girl, who had accelerated in order to avoid being humiliated in front of everyone else. Iruka, however, had already awarded the girl extra points for completing the spar within the allotted 1 minute. Rumors about Hinata's strength and skill grew when Mizuki requested a break after the girl left, claiming phantom pains in his arms and ribs, where Hinata had scored her hits. Iruka surmised that the girl was so accustomed to using Juken that, even in the absence of chakra, she was able to harm Mizuki's chakra network, more specifically, the muscles in the area that was attacked. The majority of the civilians survived the 2 minutes, but the others perished before then. After 1 minute and 13 seconds, Kiba, who was ranked as the second best Taijutsu student on paper, prevailed. Iruka finally yelled Sasuke's name. As soon as Iruka began the match, Sasuke went into overdrive, determined to be the top scorer in this section of the test. He moved noticeably more quickly than any of the previous students, and he and Mizuki engaged in a fierce Taijutsu duel. He finished the fight with a masterfully performed acrobatic move that sent Mizuki flying out of the ring after a forceful blow to the chest, landing more blows than he took. Iruka recorded his time of 1 minute and 2 seconds after stopping the timer. Being defeated by a Hyuga and a girl on top of that made him appear irate and ashamed. His fan club became aware of his brooding and started insulting the Hinata. She simply gave those girls a Baikugan enhanced glare to get them to stop talking. Shikamaru gazed at her, appreciative that she had silenced those bothersome harpies and allowed him to sleep in peace. Naruto calmly watched Mizuki standing across from him while he waited for Iruka to finish recording Sasuke's time. He paid close attention to the hidden hatred in his eyes. He readied himself to swiftly and mercilessly crush the traitor, knowing that Mizuki would likely not hold back in the opening moments of their spar. If the information was accurate, Naruto and Hinata had concluded that the recently hired assistant was collaborating with Orochimaru of the Sannin and was a traitor to the village. Hinata wanted Naruto to solve this issue on his own, even though she already knew because of her memories from the future. The rationale behind her reasoning was that she would never be able to hold Naruto's hand forever. He had to stop relying on her, and she had made the decision to only give him a gentle prod in the future if she thought he was headed in the wrong direction. Sasuke and the other students immediately turned their attention to the impending spar, curious to see if Taijutsu was one of Naruto's previously unspoken abilities. Mizuki merely wanted to beat Naruto down and reduce his chances of graduating in order to accomplish two goals at once. Mizuki was off as soon as Iruka signaled. He appeared in front of Naruto, his right fist already blazing toward the boy's head, as he blurred across the arena faster than any other genin, save for Hinata and a few chosen others, could ever hope to follow. When his hand went through the area where Naruto's face used to be, he realized that he had overextended himself because he was so sure of landing the first blow that he overcommitted to the blow. His body was already folding over the right knee that Naruto had plowed into his stomach before his mind could comprehend what the lack of impact meant. When Iruka and the students in the audience saw the foot-sized crater made where Naruto had pushed off the ground, they gasped in disbelief and blood spurted from his mouth. Just as physics caught up to Mizuki, whose body had started to rise off the ground, Naruto's leg came back down. But it was not to be. As Naruto lowered his head to meet the left knee he had just raised, his right hand suddenly grabbed his hair. A crack sounded through the clearing, and the onlookers flinched. Blood sprayed from Mizuki's mouth and nose as he fell into blissful unconsciousness. Iruka slowly looked at the clock face as numb fingers pressed the timer's button. 3 seconds. This caused a number of students to gasp and look shocked, their jaws dangling. Even Iruka was shocked that his assistant would be so severely beaten that he would lose consciousness. However, he believed Mizuki deserved it because he began the spar on a high note and intended to give the man a hard talk after patching him. As soon as Naruto was proclaimed the victor by knockout, the students started whispering. Many of them were curious as to why the alleged silly boy and class bunker had become so powerful and why he had continued to skip classes throughout the academy academic year. As Hinata witnessed the seeds of dissension and skepticism sown in every student's mind, she grinned to herself. However, she found the last Uchiha's shocked and furious face to be rather amusing, as she appeared prepared to confront her Naruto-kun and demand answers. She found it amusing that when the boy pushed himself, the Uchiha had only attained a level of high genin and borderline chunin, despite the fact that the majority of the civilians and a few stunted ninja had rushed to his aid. In the meantime, Sasuke was planning to corner Uzumaki Naruto for interrogation later and was mentally re-evaluating everything he believed he knew about him. He had no idea that his conceit would land him in serious trouble down the road. Iruka had used what little battlefield healing jutsu he knew while propping Mizuki against a tree back on the sparring field. He sparred with Ino himself after 1 minute and 50 seconds because his partner was out for the count. Iruka led the students back into the classroom for the last part of the test after they had recovered from their shock at witnessing the normally easygoing Naruto destroy their teacher. His instructions were brief because it was a fairly simple process. You hear your name, go to the next room, and follow our instructions. Once you're finished, go to the room across from you and wait for the others to finish. As usual, he began with Shino and worked his way down the list. Halfway through, Mizuki, who had recovered, joined him. Naruto's name was called after Sasuke entered when it was his turn. Hinata had already achieved flying marks in the ninjutsu section. Her henge of Mito Uzumaki had frightened both academy teachers. Mizuki had taken the brunt of her stern stare and was on the verge of passing out. A barely audible pass to the Hyuga heiress had been stammered by Iruka himself. After passing every section of the test, she put on a crimson headband and waited for Naruto's turn. Naruto's keen hearing allowed him to easily hear what was being said in the room with the people who had already completed their exams as he moved towards the connecting door. He walked into the connecting room, where the two instructors were seated at a table, and grinned to himself at having managed to agitate the hive. He moved to stand in front of them, obliviously observing that Mizuki's eyes were more filled with hatred, most likely as a result of his degrading wounds. Looking proudly at him, Iruka said, "Well, Naruto, you've gotten to the last portion of the exams. This ninjutsu test is fairly straightforward. You will be tested on the use of the basic 3 jutsu, the Kawarimi, Henge and Bunshin no Jutsu. We will begin with the Kawarimi. Now, sometime in the next 15 seconds and with no prior warning, I will launch a blunted kunai at you, which you must obviously avoid by switching out with something else. Mizuki will take care if I am using any real weapons. Extra points will be given for demonstrated mastery of the jutsu. The 15 seconds starts now." Throughout Iruka's speech, Naruto maintained a composed gaze on Mizuki, making it easy to see the desire for vengeance in his eyes when Iruka mentioned the blunted kunai. Knowing full well that Mizuki would try to make up for his earlier humiliation, he quietly became on guard for any ploys while maintaining an air of composure, indifference, and openness. He felt a very low-level genjutsu entering his system 7 seconds after the exam began, but he quickly and easily dispelled it. Mizuki leaned back in his chair, content that the genjutsu had occurred. It was taught to him by Orochimaru himself prior to his assignment in Konoha, and it prevented the victims from seeing any projectiles approaching them. In addition, he replaced Iruka's blunted kunai with his own ordinary kunai and started to await the unavoidable mishap. Iruka launched a kunai at Naruto without warning 9 seconds after the testing officially began. Naruto's eyes were able to follow it easily, even though it was moving more quickly than an academy student could manage. In an instant, the kunai traveled the gap and plunged into Naruto's chest, much to Iruka's horror and Mizuki's barely concealed delight. Devastated and perplexed as to why he had used a normal kunai, Iruka watched as Naruto's eyes widened in agony and his body started to collapse backwards. He was about to run to Naruto to offer whatever assistance he could when Naruto's body exploded in smoke, revealing a chair with the kunai protruding from it halfway. It took Iruka a moment to realize what he was witnessing, and he sagged with relief. He turned when he heard someone laughing behind him and saw Naruto standing there looking amused. While Iruka recognized that Naruto had successfully executed the replacement technique, Mizuki realized right away that the genjutsu he had cast had failed. The fact that the Kawarimi had been executed without the use of hand seals and with the level of skill that only advanced Chunin ninja could muster intrigued him. Iruka turned to chastise Mizuki for not telling him about his own use of a real kunai after he had lowered his heart rate. Iruka was somewhat duped by Mizuki's sheepish demeanor into thinking it was a simple mistake on his part. But now that he thought his new assistant was concealing something, Iruka was highly wary of Mizuki. He also clearly recalled that, due to the exams, he had only brought blunted kunai with him today. Iruka's suspicions about the new teacher's loyalty were gradually growing stronger. Mizuki even expressed regret to Naruto, who was not duped at all, for failing to notice that Iruka was not wielding a blunted kunai. Mizuki knew that Naruto had already passed his graduation exam by this time. In private, he therefore started to rework his scheme to steal the forbidden scroll of sealing. Iruka resumed the tests after the situation had subsided and he had given Naruto extra credit for executing a flawless Kawarimi without the use of hand seals and with sufficient skill to leave a decoy afterimage. Good job on the Kawarimi, Naruto. Now, you simply have to henge into another person, and then create at least 3 clones. Naruto merely nodded, and the Sandaime Hokage, complete with his pipe and full Hokage robes, took his place as his form shimmered. Iruka and Mizuki unconsciously straightened as the figure in front of them raised its head, meeting that ancient, piercing gaze. The Sandaime's figure calmly lit his pipe and exhaled a tiny stream of fire. Iruka could smell the tobacco he exhaled after taking a few puffs, and he spoke in the professor's calm and gentle tones. "How are you, Iruka-kun? Very good, Naruto. That's another sealless, smokeless and obviously mastered jutsu. At this point in time, you already have passing marks, but if you want to continue, you can attempt to create at least 3 bunshins." Iruka was about to respond, as he always did, when the Sandaime asked after him, but he stopped himself when he realized that this was Naruto wearing an uncannily realistic henge. Once more, without any smoke or noise, the room was suddenly filled with 12 Narutos arranged in a circle around it at regular intervals. Iruka and Mizuki looked around, but they couldn't tell which one was Naruto. Iruka gave Naruto full marks and extra credit for mastering the 3 academy jutsu while he laughed and jotted down notes on his clipboard. "Okay, Naruto, you can disperse them now," he said. Every Naruto he saw, including the one that stood in the place of the original, vanished into thin air. The original was standing at the back of the room, clearly amused at their surprise, when the instructors turned in surprise. "You never cease to amaze me, Naruto," Iruka said, shaking his head. Then, beaming proudly, Iruka threw him a Hite.8 and said, "You pass, Naruto, with distinction. Congratulations." Naruto caught the black-clad Hite.8 and bowed to the 2 teachers, grinning at him. The students who had finished were waiting in the room across from him as he left the room. None of the students were shocked when he entered with his Hite.8 on his forehead. It seems that Naruto had already made them less sensitive during the previous tests. 10 minutes or so later, Ino arrived with her own headband, followed by Iruka and Mizuki. Naruto was seated in the back, as he usually was. Iruka smiled at the pupils and started his final remarks. "Well, it's all done now. Though some of you might not have done as well as you expected, I am still proud of the progress you have all made. Those of you who couldn't make the passing grade can retry next year. I have full faith that you will be ready by then. For those of you who received your Hite.8, you have my congratulations. Make sure to be here tomorrow morning for team assignments." And without further ado, the announcement I know most of you have been waiting for, the Rookie of the Year. This year, the Rookie of the Year position is awarded to Uchiha Sasuke for a consistently outstanding performance throughout his attendance. Members of the Sasuke fan club screamed loudly as the majority of the students cheered, as they had already anticipated. After soothing them, Iruka continued, "There is still one more thing to take care of, however. Uchiha.san earned the title of Rookie of the Year because all 6 years of schooling were taken into account. Taking only the graduation exam into consideration, however, the results are quite different. I will now list the top 3 students with scores in each of the exam sections. Uchiha Sasuke, with scores of 8.1, 14, 11, 12 and 13, earned a total of 58.1 to come in 3rd place. After applauding Sasuke's impressive exam results, the Uchiha fan club fell silent when they saw that 2 people had clearly outscored him. Many of the students came to the correct conclusion about who the winner and 2nd place finishers were simultaneously, and they turned to stare in disbelief at the people they had mocked for the previous 2 years for being indolent and heartless. In a tone of disbelief, Uruka announced results. Hinata Hyuga is in 2nd place with scores of 9, 14, 14, 13 and 14 and is given the title of Kunoichi of the Year. Last but not the least, Uzumaki Naruto, with record-shattering scores of 10, 20, 15, 15 and 15, earned the highest possible score of 75 points to come in 1st place. Naruto is now the current holder for highest score in every portion of the graduation exams. Congratulations Naruto, and to the rest of you as well. I will see you tomorrow. Uruka and Mizuki left the classroom as the rest of the students stared in disbelief at the uninterested Naruto and Hinata. The rest of the students watched in stunned silence as they got up and wandered outside, both of them grinning at one another. They were startled out of their reverie by the sound of the door shutting behind him, and Hinata grinned when she heard a banshee cry of indignation and rage coming from Kiba and Haruno. She laughed and took Naruto's hand as he smiled at her. The 2 of them disappeared from the hallway, leaving behind panic and chaos as if they had never been there. That night, Konohagore no Sato, Hokage Tower Sarutobi Hiruzen was approaching the council room with a resolute stride. Upon seeing the 3rd Sandaime, everyone in the Hokage Tower was immediately reminded of the reason the elderly man was formerly known as the Kami no Shinobi. The ancient Hokage appeared furious and was leaking a murderous killing intent. The members of Hokage's personal ambush squad were identified by the 2 figures who were walking behind him and assuming flanking positions. They were both wearing hooded cloaks, which only revealed the lower half of their faces, which were then covered by Anbu masks. The 2 ANBU's predatory walk and the fact that neither of them recoiled from the tangible aura surrounding the 3rd Hokage, despite their own slight perspiration, caught the attention of the more seasoned and skilled ninjas right away. Furthermore, upon closer examination, it was discovered that both of them were only teenagers, appearing to be around 15 to 17 years old. This raised questions about their identities, as Konoha had prohibited children from attending Anbu following the incident involving Itachi Uchiha, who had massacred his entire clan in a single night and fled, making him one of the biggest traitors from Konoha after Uchiha Madara and Orochimaru. Naruto and Hinata had both informed Sarutobi Hiruzen of their conclusions regarding the new assistant Mizuki's betrayal of Konoha, and he was hoping for a peaceful evening that day. The reports of Jiraiya's spy network and intelligence department, which suggested that the Snake Sanin had been spotted in the same vicinity as Mizuki prior to the team's accident in which everyone but Mizuki perished, further confirmed Naruto's suspicions that he was working with Orochimaru. Hiruzen discovered, however, that the civilian council, in its infinite wisdom, had devalued Naruto's heart. Earned rank as an error and altered the team configurations and the information in the ninja records regarding his outstanding performance as cheating. Some of them even had the audacity to insist that Naruto take another test, which would be examined by a council-appointed committee from the Hokage. Hiruzen was so furious that he almost blew up his office when he read the demands. Because of this, he was going to demonstrate to these idiots why they shouldn't annoy him today. He wasn't going to be kind to them. The shinobi section, which had already sensed the approach of their enraged leader and was prepared for the impending explosion, did not even move when the doors to the council chambers opened with a deafening bang, causing all of the civilian members present to jump. But as one of them cringed in their seats, they all saw the enraged intent to kill rolling off their Hokage. With his 2 Anbu trailing him like shadows, Hiruzen strode to his chair. Shikaku Nara's eyes narrowed slightly as he sensed the ninja's chakra levels. He also stiffened as he realized that one of them had a highly developed chakra network that was even more controlled than Tsunade's. Inochi nodded and signed back after he quietly signed to him. Hiyashi Hyuga felt a flash of light blinding his eyes, so he activated his Byakugan and silently hissed in pain. He looked around in an attempt to learn more about the Anbu that was with the Hokage. Although the flash did not appear again, he saw that he was unable to pierce the material of their clothing. He pondered the recent development when a civilian member stood up and spoke to the Hokage, appearing terrified of Sarutobi's narrow-eyed glare at them all. Hokage. Sama, why are you here in the council chambers? The council hasn't summoned you yet. As Sarutobi's murderous intent intensified, the shinobi section shrank together. It appeared that things would not improve for them today. Even the blunt, spoken and brazen Inuzuka matriarch believed that the civilian member had already set off a landmine, and they would all bear the consequences. When the Sandame Hokage roared at the civilian member, who gave a little whimper of fear before fainting, they were shown to be right. Who the hell do you think that you are to demand that from me? Are you the Hokage of this village? I always allowed you all to have too much leeway. This stops now. This is not a democracy but a dictatorship. Too long I have allowed you to do as you wish. I thought Tobirama-sensei had done a good thing that he allowed civilians to vote on the council, but time and again you have proved that you cannot be trusted to help this village. A particularly fat merchant who had spent a lot of money to gain a seat on the council and use it to further expand his agenda said, but, Hokage. Sama, you do not have that kind of authority. The fate of the man was predetermined. And when the man was punched into the wall and curled up sobbing pitifully, none of the people who could see the explosion coming were shocked. With a thick killing intent, one of the figures, now identified as male, said, "Mind your tongue, counselor. Do not insult the Hokage like that. Do you understand or not?" The civilian council flinched back in their seats. Another of these idiots said, "Why you Circa cannot assault us? We are the civilian council. Tough luck, bitch. We answer only to the Hokage. Even if you are Kami's shit, we give you more care than to listen to our orders. Got it?" The man said with a sigh and a bland voice. It appeared as though a spike had been pushed up the ass of the civilian who had spoken. Maybe no one had ever dared to speak in such a way to the civilian council. The individual in question, however, did not acre and even attacked one of their members. This implied that applying pressure to such individuals would inevitably result in a spectacular backlash. Sarutobi listened and watched as the civilian council erupted, with some demanding that the Anbu be demoted and others threatening to kill the Anbu for attacking a council member. The shinobi no Kami's patience was wearing thin, and he was attempting to control his rage to avoid causing more issues for the village. Even for someone like Sarutobi who has boundless patience, it had never been necessary for him to raise his voice to make a point before. It takes more than being boisterous and impulsive to earn the title of God of Shinobi. Silent, calm, and deadly are the characteristics of ninjas. These were all aspects of what Sarutobi was all about. His high level of intelligence was what made him stand out from the others. And in this time of war and chaos, as well as in the future, that intelligence would save the village and grant him a successor. His two shadows were the only ones who saw him get up from his seat. Enough. Be silent. Maybe it was his rage or the sense of self-preservation in the room, because everyone instantly fell silent, including the always slothful Narashikaku, who awoke and stared at him intently and silently. The cool breeze and the high tempers were the only sounds coming from anyone. After reflecting on how much he had let his successor down, he recalled the times when he had passed the hat to the Yondaime. His eyes returned to the council. "I have sat and listened to your nonsense long enough. This day I am ruling that your interference in the ninja matters will not be tolerated. As for your senseless laws and demands against Naruto Uzumaki, they will not be listened to or even thought about by the shinobi unless you have a damn good proof of his so-called wrongdoing. Also, your favoritism towards the last Uchiha will cease from this day. I am not saying that you don't have do this by not helping him, but you will treat all the shinobi the same. If I hear more stupid demands, I will send you to Ibiki and Anko. Do you get it?" The Yondaime did not want him to be treated like a pariah but rather like a hero. "You all spit on the sacrifice of my late successor. He will not be used. He is a child of Konoha and he holds within him the most powerful of beasts. He deserves our respect above all." One of the civilians, a nameless council member, stood up. "But Lord Hokage, the Kyuubi could break free at any moment. Knowledge of the seal says that its soul is bound to the boys and that upon the boy's death it will die with him. Would it not be best to kill him now and avoid any future issues?" Speaking in a level tone, Sarutobi squinted at the civilian. "Naruto shall not be killed. His own life is a sacrifice. As I have told you time and again, and you have still not managed to get it into your fear-addled mind, that the Yondaime chose him to hold the Kyuubi and he believed that his people would see this boy for what he is. And what is he? A hero. A Jinchuriki. He is a living sacrifice and a living testament to a human's tenacious hold on life. I myself ensured that this boy serves Konoha. I might love the people of this village, but if the leaders are those chosen by the people to be their leaders, themselves can't tell the difference between a harmless child and the most murderous of all demons, then how can I trust the villagers to let him live a peaceful life? Now then, I want to ask you all. Look upon your actions against Naruto and tell me where the malice is. Where is the unbridled hatred and rage that the Kyuubi exuded? Where is the fear that should be present in all of you if you were the Kyuubi? But it could be a trick of the Kyuubi to lure us into false hope. It could be pretending to be harmless, another of them said. Sarutobi sighed and controlled his rage. And how exactly is that Naruto different from any other children of his age? That boy was born into a cold, harsh world on the worst night of our village's history. For this, he was foolishly ostracized and hated whenever he was allowed to mingle amongst the villagers, and I will not have that from now on. As I have told you again and again, I have ensured the boy has grown to be a ninja of exceptional quality. I have seen that he is pure of heart and loyal to the village. Another of these idiots asked, and how do you mean to ensure all that? Sarutobi growled back in his throat at their pig-headedness and stupidity. He uttered mutterings and whispers throughout the room as he said, Naruto is my chosen successor possibly or will be the Godem. I will train him in the ways of a Hokage. He will lead the village when I step down or afterwards. Should the child ever prove dangerous, we, along with the rest of the civilian council, will not hesitate to bring him down. This we swear. The village must come before a man's wishes. Until then, you have our support, Hokage. Sama, said the more moderate faction of the civilian council, after what seemed like an eternity of arguments and counter-arguments. Without another word or conversation, Sarutobi nodded and they all started to leave the chamber. Everyone knew they were no longer needed after he finished speaking. His Anbu was aware of what he needed to do. In response to his question, the male Anbu who had defended him merely bowed briefly. You know what you have to do. Get Mizuki and extract all priority information from him as you can after disabling him. Leave the rest for Ibiki. And sorry for the mess I made for your early life. I hope you can forgive an old man for his mistakes. After giving his escorts a nod, Sarutobi made a hand gesture. As though they had never been there, the three of them disappeared.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.